Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. As I mentioned last week, as you are listening to this, I am out in Pennsylvania visiting my family for the 4th of July holiday, so I'm pre-recording this episode. As such, there won't be any news, but I do have a special treat for you all, as I have invited one of the most tenured content creators in the entire games industry with me today. It's the man behind the Electric Playground Network. It's Victor Lucas. Victor, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thank you so much for inviting me on. This is an honor. I love Game Informer.
Oh, it's an absolute honor to have you on here. I mean, you know, you've been doing this. I was thinking about it last night. Like, I like to think that I've been around the game for a while. I've been doing this for about 16 years.
Yeah.
You've been doing this almost twice as long as I have been doing it.
I started pitching the idea of EP in 1995, and we actually were one of the first websites in the space, and we had an all-gray background for the first Electric Playground website in 1995. I've had one email address the whole time, I've been doing the same thing, it just in interesting different directions and lots of unique opportunities this whole time. So in that 30-year range, which is kind of crazy and who knew, but do what you love, they say.
Yeah, I mean, do what you love and you'll work yourself into the ground for the rest of your life. That's what they say, right?
I have worked very hard and I continue to work very hard, but I do genuinely love what I get to do. I feel so bloody grateful. I mean, that's the key of it. I just have always felt grateful to be able to do this, and I continue to.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like I said, I've been doing it for 16 years, so not quite as long as you, but I've been in the game for a while, and you know, it is a lot of work as you indicated, but it's also so darn fun, and
Yeah.
I don't take any moment of it for granted whatsoever. And we're
Yep.
going to get into a little bit of shop talk in this first segment. But
Hmm.
first, we have a tradition on All Things Nintendo where we get to know our guests for their first time coming on the show through the lens of their history with Nintendo.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you two questions here, Victor. First one is, what is your first Nintendo game? This could be your first experience with a Nintendo game, your first memory, or your first impactful memory, the thing that made you say, oh, I kind of like the stuff that this company does.
Well, I was a kid of the '80s, and so the arcades were a big deal in my life, and they were very influential with regards to my lifelong love of video games. And so Donkey Kong has to be that game. You know, I remember seeing Donkey Kong. We didn't have like a traditional arcade in my neighborhood. We had a pool hall, and
Mm.
I lived in a Greek area of Vancouver called Kitsilano. And so it was a pool hall that was had a lot of older Greek guys, some of them in old fisherman's cap, playing backgammon, and then there was pool being played, and then all of a sudden this infiltration of arcade games started happening there. And I remember things like Pac-Man looking like a cartoon that you could play, but that was absolutely taken to another level with Donkey Kong. It really was like this animated movie that you were playing. It was so gorgeous and so clever and instantly charming. So I fell in love with that. And I had all the Atari stuff and the Coleco and lots of other the Vectrex. You can see the Vectrex I have is had and bought back then is still back there. And I was in school and I kind of took a break from video games for a minute. I know that's a shocker and incomprehensible today, but I kind of took a break because I was pursuing acting. But I got out of acting school and was starting to get some work and was rewarding myself with video games like crazy. And one of the first things I bought was a Nintendo Entertainment System. So if we're talking home console, some of the first games that I remember were Mega Man 2. I absolutely adored that
Ooh.
game. So challenging, but so cool and so much better than the stuff that I'd grown up with. And River City Ransom also really blew my mind that it was not just a brawler, it was an RPG and it had depth and there were layers and it just kept going and going. And I was like, oh my God, video games have gotten so freaking incredible. So lifelong, never going to cease loving Nintendo.
And as somebody who, you know, your first experience with Nintendo was really Donkey Kong, how
Yeah.
have you viewed kind of the evolution of that franchise over the years? Because, you know, it kind of went away for a while. Then we got
Yeah.
like Donkey Kong Country out of nowhere. And it was like, oh, not only is this not developed by Nintendo, it's rare, but like it's a completely different genre. This is like, you know, you're playing as a different version of Donkey Kong, even. Like, how did you view that? And then like the other iterations that we've got of the character?
I think that whole Rare era with Nintendo was one of the healthiest times in video games because we
Mhm.
had two master developers sort of in this low key back and forth. You could almost feel the palpable competition between these companies to outdo one another and surprise us as players more than the other. I mean, to Mario Kart 64, we have Diddy Kong Racing, and all of the fantastic 2D Mario experiences, I think, were kind of matched by what Rare delivered in their own unique way with the Donkey Kong Country games of bringing those back. But there's a Donkey Kong game specifically that I always think about, and that's the 1994 Game Boy game, which is my favorite Game Boy game. And if anybody that's
Oh,
listening to
wow.
this or watching this hasn't played that, they absolutely need to get that. It's going to be this revolutionary moment when they put Donkey Kong on the Nintendo Switch Online store for Game Boy. People are going to be blown away by the feature set and the imagination and the levels and layers. I mean, that was Nintendo really taking that Game Boy architecture and just showing people what they could do. It was incredible. And I'm surprised it hasn't been remade, honestly. I like that Mario versus Donkey Kong game that we got earlier this year, but Donkey Kong was seminal, so good. And I did love the Donkey Kong Country games. But at the same time as those Donkey Kong Country games were coming out, the move to 3D for real was happening, and I was
Mhm.
fully paying attention. I was reading Game Informer and Next Gen and all the other magazines out there at that time, crafting in my mind an idea for what I wanted to do with my life, which ended up becoming the Electric Playground. And so I was also really kind of aware that 3D was coming, And then when we got Mario 64, it was all over. Really, it was like
Oh, yeah.
version 2 of what games were all of a sudden. It was a whole new language. And so I love those Donkey Kong Country games, and I also love the 3D, 2D Donkey Kong games, the 2.5D ones.
Mhm.
Um, but I had kind of pivoted away. So I'm really looking forward to playing the new HD remake on the Switch of Donkey Kong Country Returns. But I also feel like we haven't had the full 3D Donkey Kong experience. As cool as the extended universe of the family is and all these other ancillary characters, like a sequel to Diddy Kong Racing would be amazing. But uh, I would also love a full. Like I wasn't a big fan of Donkey Kong 64. That was the one
Mhm.
thing. Like Rare couldn't quite keep up with Nintendo's mastery. Although the Banjo Kazooie games are pretty phenomenal. Um, yeah, it's a bit rambly. I love Donkey Kong. I want to see more Donkey Kong in 3D, and I'm excited that more 2D Donkey Kong is coming. And wait till you get your hands if you've never played on Donkey Kong and the Game Boy. It is incredible.
Yeah, Donkey Kong 94, legendarily good remake of the original,
Yes.
and then like you said, adding a ton of features to the overall suite. The thing that I was actually surprised at when you said that was that, like, it's not on the Game Boy catalog for Nintendo Switch
Not yet.
Online. I
Nope.
was actually on, like, you may have noticed I went to go Google something. I was actually looking up, I was like, "It has to be on Nintendo Switch Online, right?" And then, like,
Nope.
you pointed out that it's not, and I'm like, "Oh my god, how is it not on there?" It's one of the greatest games in that system.
I have it in my analog pocket right now. I have an analog what are they called, the NG or something, the Super
Mhm.
Nintendo analog thing, and I have the Super Game Boy in there, and I pop it in there and
Oh,
play it on the big screen all the time. It's an
it's
amazing game.
it's
Totally
really
holds
good.
up. Another
Uh,
awesome one from that era is Kirby's Pinball Land, which I never see
mm.
anybody talking about. That is also one of those go tos for me. I love that game.
Yeah, there's so many great Game Boy games that I feel like just people like us who, like, grew up having these systems,
Yeah.
like, look
Yes.
back on fondly, but then, like, people who are maybe 10, 15, 20 years younger than us, they're like, "Why would I ever wanna go back and play those games?" And
Right.
that's why I'm hoping that Nintendo Switch Online enables them. Like, I've come around on the concept of Nintendo Switch Online because I
Yes, me
used to be
too.
like, "Why do I want this? I want Virtual Console where I can own my games."
Right.
And I've come around on it because it's that thing of, like, it's that Netflix effect where are already paying for the subscription. They just added these 5 obscure games that I've never even heard of. I probably wouldn't drop $10 each to buy them, but I'm already paying the subscription. I might as well check them out. And it's like, "Oh, wait, this game's actually really fun."
And they're bubbled up right to the top too. That's the
Hmm.
other thing that we're not talking about. Like if they were in the virtual console, you'd already have to know about these games. And what I love is every time they add to and they have separate videos about releases to NSO, and they
Hmm.
have a big Nintendo Direct, and right in the middle of it, they take a moment and they talk about classic games in the middle of their delivery service. I think that's so cool.
It
Yes, we
is.
want more. Yes, there could be more information about these games. I think one of the things that they could do is they could filter out the special edition. You could press a filter button so you only get the final games, because sometimes it looks a little bit cluttered. That could be true for every one of these digital stores. The fact that you can see all of the DLC and the microtransaction and things that pop up on every time you load up a store. It's like, no, I just want the core games, you know?
Yeah. Thankfully, you can
But
rearrange them though, like however you
you
want. I
can, yeah.
really appreciate that because I am a stickler for having like, my iTunes library is meticulously laid out. And like back when I was collecting Blu-rays of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I have the entire Infinity Saga like in order, like
That's great.
chronologically and everything. I
That's
eventually
great.
stopped that once they put like all the Disney Plus shows. I was like, I cannot keep up with this. And plus,
No,
they
you
weren't even
cannot.
releasing them in Blu-ray for a long time there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I eventually did fall off that. I think the last one I bought was Spider-Man Far From Home, which, is the official end cap of the Infinity Saga. But back when, like, I'm such a stickler for like, if I'm going to have something, it's going to be organized. If I'm going
Yeah.
to collect it anyway.
Yes.
And so yeah,
Well,
having the ability to rearrange that, and I can move all the special editions of the NSO down to the
yeah.
bottom if I really want to. And I have done that for a couple of them, but yeah, I'm with you. There are some other features I wish they would implement.
Well, it's just cool that those games are there, and you can't avoid them. You can't avoid those
Hmm.
games. You're going to see them if you pop into your Genesis library or whatever. Like I'd never experienced Musha on the Genesis before. That's one of my favorite games on that whole library. And there's some
Oh
classics in
wow.
there, but Musha is amazing, you know. And there's tons of like gold. I love that the Metroid games are in the GBA
Oh
catalog.
no.
It's
Yeah.
great. They just got to open the floodgates. It's going to be very interesting with Switch 2 if we go to DS and 3DS and GameCube and you know and they could. I got
I
some
hope they
wild
do.
I got some wild ideas about the DS and 3DS software. I actually came up with it on the and I don't know if it's out there, but I guess I'll say them. Okay, I'll
Go
just say
for
it
it.
right now. Because it's all speculation right now and who knows what's going to happen. But what if Nintendo said, you know what, we did really well. We sold into the hundreds of millions with the DS, 3DS concept. There are thousands of games that are sitting there, and these consoles are kind of end of life. You can't go into those stores. What if we found a way to emulate them and upgrade them? And offered them to Switch 2 owners, but we also provided an adapter so that you could put the Switch 1, take off the Joy-Con, put the Switch 1 as the bottom screen. We have the controls for the
Oh,
Switch 2, and you've got the two screens there, your 720 and your 1080p screen, and you can play these 3DS and DS games in beautiful, up-res emulation mode in handheld on with using these two devices.
I love that. I mean,
Eh,
and I mean they've sold
Would
into the hundreds of millions of Switches as well. So it's not like there's like a shortage of Switches out in the wild.
Yes, but you know what that does is it creates a currency for collecting the Switch still, because you could still play those DS and 3DS games in wide, and they're going to be great that way too with the touchscreen functionality on both machines. But what if there was an adapter you could use them both so your Switch is still employed? And I'd never thought of that, and I was in the middle of the stream and I brought it up. I'm like, that would be awesome. They should totally do that.
It would. I don't know like the technical limitations of that or like
No.
what it would require to retrofit the Switch to work within that infrastructure. But I
Yeah.
agree with you. That sounds awesome. And also, Nintendo's probably looking over at like the PlayStation 2 sales numbers and be like, all right, how can we really push ourselves over that hump and become the
Yeah.
greatest selling video game system of all time?
Right.
And I mean, that's one way. Like we got a Switch 2 coming out next year. Almost everybody knows it. You know
Yep.
what? What if we just gave people another reason to go pick up a Switch beyond just like, okay, well, there's a gold Zelda Switch coming out.
Right.
So
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it might be too fanciful to be able to do that, but because I don't think they would do another dual screen machine and try to.
mhm.
I don't. They might. We never know what
Maybe.
Nintendo's going to do. That's one of the best things about Nintendo is the surprise and delight. You just never know.
One of the
And
best and
they're
worst things.
yeah, best and worst, but they're also their, and this is best and worst as well. Also, their love of their classic IP
Mhm.
and their ability to repackage it for us so that we remember it and we re-enjoy it. Like I'm sure you're playing Luigi's Mansion or you beat Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. It's amazing. It's just great to re-experience these things.
Yeah, and it's nice
And I
that we can get these handheld games over onto the consoles, like you said. Like, there's
yeah
so many like 3DS games. I was like, man, it would be amazing if they just upres this a little bit to make it look good on a big screen, and
yeah
then just give it to a whole new audience.
yes, that would be so wild.
So that brings us to the second part of this question, Victor. What is your
Yeah.
favorite Nintendo game of all time?
It is Zelda Breath of the Wild. I thought about it for a long time when you posed the question, and there are a lot. I mean, Super Mario 64 was that answer for a long time because it
Mm,
really was this pivot point for the whole business. And of course, I loved Ocarina of Time. I love the classic stuff. Super Metroid is one of my favorites too. But Breath of the Wild was so unexpected and so filled with wonder and delight uh, just beauty. It was like playable Miyazaki, It was
mhm,
open world, it was a physics playground. It also it like I love Tears of the Kingdom and the imagination that's in that game, but that game honestly was overwhelming for me because it just was so big and it just kept going and going and going. And I just felt like Breath of the Wild, as big as it was, I could wrap my brain around it, and I really didn't want it to end. I really just wanted to live in that world. It was so gorgeous. By the time I finished Tears, especially because I'd finished Breath, I was like, okay, I am good. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go away for a while from Hyrule. But Breath was perfection. It was just astounding, and one of the most incredible things about it was playing it in handheld mode on planes, and I'm in Hyrule in this world that never ends, and was just so gorgeous. Yeah, so Breath is still my vote for my favorite Nintendo game of all time.
Yeah, it's also my favorite Nintendo game of all time. My favorite video game in general of all time,
Yes.
and like you said, it was an N64 game for me for the longest time. Ocarina of Time was my favorite for about 20 years,
Yeah.
and then here comes Breath of the Wild, and it just like, at first I was like, okay, maybe I'm being too reactionary. Maybe I played it when it first came out in 2017, and it is just like one of those like recency bias things. Then
Yes.
I waited 4 years and I went back and I replayed it, and I was like, "Oh, no, this reaffirmed the fact that this is easily my favorite game of all time." Just the sense of
Yeah.
wonder, the fact that, like, you could go anywhere, do anything, and, like, there was always going to be something amazing waiting for you around every corner,
Yeah.
and I love Tears of the Kingdom as well. Like, Tears of the Kingdom, without Breath of the Wild, might be my favorite game of all time.
Totally.
But the
Yes.
novelty of Breath of the Wild just, it gave me a feeling I thought was long gone in
Yeah.
my
Yes.
gaming life. Because, like, I've said this on this podcast several times where, like, the feeling of walking out into Hyrule Field in Ocarina of Time for the first time, back when those types of games weren't a dime a dozen, it was just like, "Oh my god, like, I could just walk over to the castle right now," or, "Oh, I can just go
Yeah.
over here now." And it just felt so immense. And then eventually we got things like GTA and we got other big open games, and I
Yeah.
almost felt desensitized to it. And I thought like,
Yes.
okay, well, I'm just never going to have that feeling again. And then Breath of the Wild came out and it's like, oh my god, they somehow did it. They captured that feeling again.
And what's so amazing about Nintendo too is that it isn't a tech show off. There's beautiful technology in this work, but it's an art show off. It's a flex on the stylized decisions that they make with the things that they craft, and they are eternally beautiful. I mean, you can look at Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door on Switch, and it's exquisite. And you can also go back and play the GameCube game; it's still exquisite. And there's so many of 2D experiences that are totally with beautiful pixel art that totally hold up. Like the Metroid games on GBA, and then you play Metroid Samus Returns on 3DS, and it's incredible, or Metroid Dread, and it's incredible. But it isn't so overtly flexing its technical muscle to be so current and so state of the art that
Hmm.
it kind of undoes itself when you go back to these games. And that's why I think Nintendo does such an amazing job at letting us dive back in with NSO, you know. And again, this isn't a commercial for NSO, and we want it to be better, but it's really rad to go back and check these things out. And honestly, it would be nice if there were games that were on the sort of cutting edge, like GoldenEye and stuff. If Nintendo did a little more polish and clean some of the stuff up, like controls and stuff. But it's still it's something I've definitely noticed. They don't play the technology game, you know, and I'm glad companies do. I'm not trying to throw shade at Naughty Dog or Insomniac or From in some ways. There's lots of other beautiful, developed and gorgeous looking games out there that we need. They're great to play and they're great to share with people, you know, like, and that's our
Hmm.
job as evangelists. We want to keep telling people uh, how much games have gone farther than they can even imagine. And those are the types of games. You show people Spider-Man 2. It's like, look at how gorgeous this is, right? But Nintendo stuff is more focused on mechanics and uh, the art style that fits the play of it always.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the GameCube was the real pivot point for them in that regard,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
Nintendo 64, they were like, "Hey, we've got 64 bits. It's right there in the name." And
Yeah.
then GameCube, it's like, "Okay, yeah, we're comparable to the PS2 and the original Xbox." And then like after that, it was like they have never had a console that is like on par with the power that
Right.
PlayStation and Xbox is putting out. You know, the Wii was
Correct.
obviously underpowered. It didn't even output in HD natively.
Yep.
And then the Wii U, like I
Gorgeous
guess,
games on there, though. Gorgeous, beautiful little
yeah,
machine, that little Wii. Yeah.
it's the mechanics and it's the art style, like you said, and
Yep.
that tradition has really carried forward. And I mean, I'm a big proponent of the Wii U. I think there were a lot of miscalculations and missteps that Nintendo made in
Yep.
the console itself. But
Yep.
that system had so many great games, like
It did.
just an unbelievable wealth of games that so few people played, which is why we saw so many of them ported to the far more popular console, the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I
and, you
love the
know,
Wii
you
U.
remember playing Zombie U for the first time and sort of
Yeah.
feeling like, "Oh, yeah, it is kinda cool to look at the TV," and that's another system, although we've had most of those, most of the bangers, I think, have been ported to Switch, but that is another system that they could make for the Switch 2, Switch 1 dual screen hybrid as well. Just to put that out there, Nintendo, we would all want that. That would be really cool if you did something like that.
I mean, there's the main thing that I found that the second screen was most useful for is in a Zelda game, having your
Yeah,
inventory there without having to go into a pause screen. You could just be like, you know,
totally.
whether it was Ocarina of Time 3D on the 3DS or Wind Waker HD on the Wii U, just
Yes.
go right in there and just okay, I want to equip this now, and just like touch it and it's equipped. It's not having to go into menus or anything like that. That was just revelatory when it
It was
came
awesome.
to the Zelda franchise.
Totally, and I love the mapping in real time, and you look down, it's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, yeah," you know, like, Zombie U was a pretty damn cool demo for what that could have been at that time, you know? I'm playing Luigi's Mansion 2, and one of the things that I was when I was streaming it yesterday, I was looking for how many of the gems I'd found because it wasn't popping up in the menu, and I'm thinking on the and I don't know because I haven't gone back to the 3DS, but I was thinking on the 3DS, do you see that all the time on the bottom screen? Are you aware of all the gems that you have collected? Because you only get that pop up when you find one. And I thought, that's, you know, there are reasons why it was a weird concept getting pitched the DS that first time and the 3DS again. It was weird, but then you get used to those cool little touches, those cool things that
Mhm.
are only available there, you know?
Yeah,
That's why
and
Nintendo has an opportunity here with this. I didn't want to turn this into the pitch of my wacky idea, but I keep thinking about it. It keeps swirling in my brain. That would be so freaking rad.
it would be. And it's interesting that, like, you know, Breath of the Wild originally developed just for the Wii U, and then eventually they're like, "Oh, we should just put this on our new console," when because the Wii U was a dud from a sales perspective at that point.
Yeah.
The simultaneous shipping of Breath of the Wild made it an
Yes.
interesting point for Nintendo because they couldn't possibly put the map on the Wii U gamepad because it would make
Right.
the Wii U version the superior version.
Right.
So they just made it so like the Wii U gamepad, which is what the Sheikah Slate was modeled after in the first place,
Yes.
is just a blank screen basically, and it's like, oh, I know what you guys were gonna do here, but like
Oh man,
obviously they
I never played it on the Wii U. That's interesting. That's
yeah.
so interesting.
So
You
they
know,
actually made that version worse to make it so the Switch version was slightly better.
you know what, man? If they make Metroid Prime 4 Beyond a cross-gen launch release, they could use the Switch 2 as a map.
They could.
Or the Switch 1 on the bottom if of some kind of adapter thing. I don't know. I mean, the mind is reeling now with what they could do. I'm going to be happy with whatever they do. I do want them to just call it the Switch 2. You know, I
Mhm.
want them to have a numeric upgrade. I don't want them to try to Wii U this or
And
even
don't get overly
super.
cute.
Yeah, they could have done like the OLED could have been a Super Switch. They could have
Yes.
done that. That's the Nintendo Super Switch. It's got a little more horsepower and an OLED screen. They could have done that, but now that moment I think is past. They can't go to Super now. They have to go to another new number.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm an analyst or whatever, but I
Well, I
just
mean,
want
they
it to be a huge win because they haven't really done that. They have huge win, go okay, huge win, not does well, huge no, that's their whole roller coaster. Not with their handhelds. Their handhelds have always done well, but the consoles, the little roller coaster.
well, they had to recover on the 3DS. The 3DS was slow off the starting line.
Mm,
Remember they had to do the Nintendo Ambassador program because of
you're
that.
right. Yeah, you're right.
Just no games for the 3DS initially. It was like what, Street
Yep.
Fighter 4 and Pilot Wings? Were those the games that came out on 3DS initially? And
Steel
then
Diver.
Ocarina of Time came out a few months after it, but like
Yep.
again, like nothing that was like, oh, I've got to have a 3DS for that. I bought it for Ocarina of Time, but
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
that's just because I have a very soft spot for that game. But all right, well, I'm glad we're
Yep.
Breath of the Wild bros because you know, also yeah,
Fist
fist
bump.
bump that, yeah. Also, when I had Reggie Fils-Aimé on the show, he also shared that as his favorite Nintendo game of all time.
That's a masterpiece.
It is.
It's my favorite game of all time. Grand Theft Auto 3 was in there too, though I do have
Mhm.
to say, because I felt like um, Super Mario 64 kind of changed the dialogue to 3D and pivoted the whole business into a whole new direction. And then Grand Theft Auto 3 did that similarly with the idea that content could be quite mature in video games. And not that we want every game to be that, but it was a way of saying, look, there's an artistic expression here that is multifaceted and complex, and it's for everyone. And you're not going to grow out of this art form. It's going to stay with you for your life, and you're going to be entrenched in these dramas in much the same way you would be The Sopranos or a Martin Scorsese picture. You're going to watch and play these experiences, and they're going to stick with you, and they're going to be powerful stories with interesting characters and great satire and fun mechanics. And Grand Theft Auto 3 started that, and it
Mhm.
was very hard to replicate that except when Rockstar did it, and
A lot of people
they kind of
tried.
they tried, and Rockstar is really, I can't wait for 6. I can't wait to see what they're going to do there. But with Red Dead Redemption 1 especially, I prefer that one to 2, although 2 is gorgeous.
Mhm.
And Grand Theft Auto 5 is wonderful as well. Yeah, they're an incredible company, but there's been amazing, open world. The Assassin's Creed early days were just staggering, and Mafia games were incredible as well. Um, but yeah, when Breath of the Wild came out, it was kind of like a return to innocence and this return to wonder and awe in games done from this very stylistic. I don't know if Miyazaki was part of um, the Studio Ghibli kind of, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, kind of aesthetic was part of the marketing of the game, but that's what I saw, when I saw it and touched it for the first time at E3, I guess 2016. And it was just like, oh my God, this is so stunning. It's just so freaking stunning. And then to see it on a handheld screen when the
Yeah.
Switch comes out, it's like, what? How is this even this magic? How is this happening?
I
So
still
cool.
remember the first time I played it at E3 2016 as well, and,
Yeah.
I remember being like, "I don't think I get it. I don't think this is like the Zelda that I want."
Right.
And because it's such a hard game to really wrap your head
You
around in
can't
a
demo it. Yeah.
30, 45-minute demo or whatever
Yeah,
they gave
totally.
us.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then it came out and it was just like, "All right, this is my personality now."
Yeah, totally.
Before we move on to talking a little bit more about your career, Victor, I did want to give the audience a little bit of a programming note that I gave last week, just to reiterate. I'll be traveling again next episode on assignment I'll be out in California. Then I will be out in Tokyo the final week of July. So expect some pre-recorded episodes in the next few weeks. But I will always do my best to keep everyone in the loop. And also a reminder that you can join the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page, which gives you the easiest access to the show. It's the best way to interact with the podcast and get the latest info outside of just listening to the show. You can submit questions or topic suggestions there, or you can email me directly at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. And then, of course, be sure to check out my new YouTube channel where I'm posting not only the full video version of each episode, but also more edited clips with trailers embedded into the discussions. And then also having a good time doing that, trying to push to get to 500 subscribers, which everybody tells me is the most important early milestone for a YouTube channel. So do check that out if you feel so inclined. So, Victor, let's get into a little bit about your history with content creation with the games industry. You've been doing Electric Playground. You said you started pitching it in 1995. So I guess
Yeah.
talk to me about how you kind of got into running the show over there.
Well, first of all, keep rocking on your YouTube grind, brother. I think
Oh,
that's
thanks.
fantastic. I know all about it because I had to pivot from TV to YouTube, and it is a whole new game, and everybody's got a different idea. All I can say is just keep doing what you love, and things start to happen and follow. And you're clearly doing that. You're a terrific host, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
But
Means a lot.
yeah, I started. Uh, with this idea, I was kind of having like this quarter life crisis when I was in my 20s, and I was an actor that was also a waiter. That cliche, and I didn't want to be a waiter, and I wanted to create things, and I didn't really feel like it was going to happen for me to wait for someone to discover me. And I think there is some beauty in just persevering and just keep at it. But I don't know. I felt like I should try to figure out a business or something where I could be the master of my own destiny in some ways. And I mean, that's pretty hard to think of a TV show as any kind of real thing that could be, that could actually come true. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful, because I know there was a lot of luck, but there was so much determination in this idea. And so I wrote down 100 different ideas, and the one that I sort of put myself forward on was this idea that I loved Entertainment Tonight back then, and I loved Siskel and Ebert back then. There was a movie review show. A lot of your listeners probably have never heard of these shows, but I enjoyed their behind the scenes look at the entertainment industry, and I liked the dissection of entertainment that Siskel and Ebert were doing. And I thought if you could marry those two concepts for a television show about the video game industry that went behind the scenes and brought us all of these different developers and helped us to learn how this stuff was getting made, I think there's going to be a lot of people out there that are like me that would want this stuff. And I'd been collecting the magazines since the 80s, Atari Age, and, Electronic Gamers, and I can't even remember all the time. I still have a bunch of those issues. And then the PlayStation was coming, and I could really see that as like, this is a pivot point for talking about games and how 3D we're essentially moving towards playable Pixar. And Toy Story had come out, and everybody was fully aware of this 3D CG revolution that was happening, and it was going to happen in games. And I thought, okay, let's go talk to broadcasters about this whole concept. But before that, I had to put a pitch together. I put a 3-page pitch on what the show would be and some kind of segments and things like that. And we really started to develop the concept in that line, and it was really straightforward talking with people because I could see it so clearly in my head. But I'd never done it before. I'd only been acting and only been a waiter, and so I had to kind of just hold my breath and walk into boardrooms and meet with game makers and meet with broadcasters and potential production partners and potential employees and stuff. And we just started to cobble together a group of people that helped us build a demo, and then a refined demo. We went to E3 in '95. Rather than spend money on a potential partner that said, we need $5,000 from you to show how serious you are to want to work with us, I said, nah, it's okay. We'll spend the 5,000 and we'll go to E3 and shoot interviews at E3 in '95. And that honestly turned out to be such a rocket boost because there was no show, there was no money. It was all just this. The website had launched, but we had started to build relationships with the game companies. And I met George Lucas there. I went to the Sony
Wow.
party where Michael Jackson was walking around. I met lots of people that I still am friends with across the video game industry. Interviewed Ed Boon and John Tobias and David Perry, and we got this content. We went home and started editing stuff together. We put video on our website in '95, which was like postage stamp size, and people would
Yeah.
download it off of their 28.8 modems. But I met
Two
Tommy
days.
Tallarico there. Yeah, and I met Tommy Tallarico there, who I had known from the magazines because he was already a personality in that world, and had a good conversation with him, and then we just started to kind of cobble together a pitch and a video pitch, and it was pretty good. But we wanted to make it a little more inside baseball and bring us inside a little bit more. And so a friend suggested that I hire a host that everybody knew. And so at E3 '96, we met Tommy again, and the light bulb hit. And it's like, everybody knows this guy. This guy's, very good at letting people know who he is and what he's about and what he does. And he's got friends across the industry. So I asked him and his dad, because we went to an after E3 party, for him to join and be a host on the show. And he said, okay, let's do it. And so he came up to Vancouver and we shot some demo stuff. And he was great on camera. He's so magnanimous and funny and crazy. And, he is that. When you watch the early stuff, he is that crazy dude, that's really ready to throw himself at anything. And it was kind of wonderful for a first-time producer and director to kind of. I became a director for the show a little bit later on, but it was awesome to see that energy, and to
Mm.
utilize that energy.
Well, I'm
But
glad you got
anyways,
the father's blessing.
it was funny. It was like we were asking for, is it okay? Tommy's dad, who's a character, and he's in our early stuff as well. He was a character. Rest in peace.
Oh,
Wonderful guy. And then we pitched it again, and we actually went to different broadcasters. Our first broadcaster is a company called KVOS. They are based in Bellingham, Washington, but their biggest market is in Vancouver, Canada. So there's a cross-border thing. And that was, and I'm forgetting the general manager there, but it was an incredible meeting, sitting down with them, pitching him the whole idea with the show. And he says, yeah, I think I want to pick the show up. This sounds good. What do you need from me? And I said, well, how about a letter saying that you want to pick up the show? And he said, okay, when can I get that to you? And I said, how about right now? And he went, okay. And he sat down and he typed up the letter and signed it. And so that was our first company that was ready to air the show. And then based on that, we went to different TV expos. They're called NatP, which is kind of like an E3 for TV. I don't know if it's still running right now because TV's gone through everything, just like all media has. But we slowly started to meet people across both the game industry and the television industry. And through a lot of goodwill and people believing, honestly, I'm so grateful for this. They could see it in my eyes that this was a pure-hearted, I just loved this business and I wanted to put it on TV. That was it. It was not like I want to be famous or I'm from this huge production company that sees a market opportunity here and we got to get the kids something because the kids are going to buy all this stuff. It was not that. It was like, I love Entertainment Tonight at Siskel and Ebert, and there are millions of video game magazines. There should be a show that's like that, like those shows about games, because people want to know more. And people were like, okay, all right. So yeah, we started signing sponsors and broadcasters, and we aired in 1997 was our first season. We self-syndicated across Canada and down the west coast of the U.S. And then in '98, we started to add some networks. Our first one was the Space Network in Canada, which was equivalent to Sci-Fi. And ups and downs, and didn't know if we're going to get new seasons and stuff. But eventually, that led to a relationship with Discovery. We had in 2001, we had 2 seasons of EP running, and I'd pitched them on picking up our reviews segment as a separate show, and we were going to build another show for them for 2002. And then the 9/11 happened and everything changed, the whole kind of viewpoint around video games and any violence on screen and personnel at Discovery changed. But G4 was launching in 2002, and I got to know Charles Hirschhorn, who ran the network. He was shooting stuff for Disney because he was working at Disney prior to G4, and he came to visit our studio in Vancouver, and he showed me the demo concept for the G4 network. And he said, sorry, I've kind of taken your idea for your show and turned it into a whole network. And I said, well, you don't have to apologize. I wasn't going to do that. That's amazing. And then we figured out a way to work together, and we gave them our review show. They called it Judgment Day. It was Tommy and I making that. And it was kind of 6 episodes at a time, and then 7 episodes and 13 episodes. And so it was a lot of piecemeal things where they had a finite run and we didn't know if we were getting more. And then eventually that led to a really strong relationship with G4 in the States and Rogers in Canada, because they picked up the licensing for G4 in Canada. And we were in that field. And so that turned into Electric Playground becoming a daily show in 2008. And that was very successful. We basically went out to other things that gamers would be interested in, and that was dovetailing right when the MCU was taking off. So we were
Perfect
on
timing.
set with these movies, and we did the behind the scenes on the Iron Man game and the Hulk game. I was interviewing Robert Downey Jr. and Jon Favreau and all these people. We were, in edit suites as they were making the first Iron Man movie. I got to know Stan Lee through this whole period. It was all incredible. And then Reviews on the Run became a daily show in 2010. We got new distribution for EP, as it was a daily show in the States. So we were airing on WABC and ABC and NBC and CBS affiliates all over the map at different time slots and everything. We weren't Paramount, but we had this footprint of millions of homes across North America watching this stuff. Aired in Australia on the Sci-Fi Network down there. And we were just doing our same nerdy discussion, but what we figured out along the way was a way to make it palatable for everybody. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of the whole team. I'm especially freaking grateful to my wife, who has helped me run everything all the way along, and has gritted her teeth at some of my crazy, wacky ideas. We've been together for 33 years.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. And she just has been the anchor, the person that has kept everything working while I dream. What can we do? What can we build? I've just been doing all that. And then G4 went away, and so Rogers was like, in Canada, had a tap of content that got turned off, and that added major pressure to our company. But they also bought the NHL rights right around that same time, so they spent billions of dollars in a different direction, and that kind of added and compounded some stuff to our business as well. And so 2015, at the end of 2015, we didn't renew deals, even though the US stations all wanted more content. We just didn't have the budget. And also a lot of the advertising had been shifting to the internet, as every purveyor of every other media is acutely aware of. And so we got kind of caught in that, but we'd done a 20-year run on television, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I got invited to a Ubisoft event and covered the Division launching, and shot it on my iPhone and edited it together and stuck it on my YouTube channel, or on the EP YouTube channel, and got a lot of views. And it was like, oh, okay, I guess people just do this. This is what you can do, And so I kept doing it, and I had friends and colleagues, employees that we were working with, and tried it in a bunch of different ways. And so that's kind of still the story that's happening now.
Yeah, and you're crushing
Yeah.
it still to this day. And I love that you're putting up like classic EP episodes up on the YouTube channel. Are there any like licensing headaches that go through that, since it was produced for so many different companies and different partners?
No, because it was all owned by our production
Oh,
company,
that's
which
so
I own.
smart. That's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
smart.
yeah. So the whole concept and everything is owned by our production company. So we own the rights to all of that. And we're just running the classic stuff. We did a deal last year with the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and they've got a game studies program. They acquired this huge archive of classic video games and systems from a gentleman named Sid Bolton, who was a friend. He passed away, sadly.
Hmm.
And my other colleague and friend, Scott Jones, who was co-hosting with me on both of our shows, wonderful guy, was working with Sid Bolton's widow to find a home for all of these classic game systems and games. And they ended up at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and then he opened the door for us to talk with them. And so I sat down with Chris Young, who manages the library over there, and we just worked out a deal. So they've got an educational license for the access to this archive.
Mm.
We shipped them 100 boxes of our physical media, 100 moving boxes. It was so much work, and he came out and helped me pack it all up. And we're packing it up, and I'm putting the tapes in. I'm realizing these are thousands of dollars of expenditures and thousands of man hours, really, every one of these tapes. Because it's not just the 4,000 plus episodes of the content that they're doing, but they also have all of our raw footage, all of our lengthy interviews,
Wow.
the 20-minute conversations that we would have with people that get boiled down to a 3-minute piece on the show.
God,
And
I wish I had some of my old interviews that I had. Like people have actually reached out and be like, "Hey, we found this article that you wrote in like 2011. Do you still have the audio of that? Like we wanted to like see if there was any more context that you could add." And I'm like, "No, those those files are long gone." Because they're,
yeah,
I was just going to like PAX East with my iPhone and being like, "Hey, talk into this thing."
yeah, it's a real challenge, when you're building the material, and what I'm recognizing as we're running these classic things, because what's happened is they've digitized everything, they've upconverted everything to 4K, so these shows have never looked better, and we're running them every Saturday. We premiere them every Saturday. Every week, we're kind of celebrating a new classic show, and that's going to continue for years. It's a big project, and I could have shifted my whole thing to kind of celebrate what I've done, but I love the new stuff too. I
Of
love talking
course.
to new creators and new content and covering all this stuff. And so I was at a real crossroads. And without these guys and also our sponsor partners at PMP Games, they have really helped to make this a cool new part and aspect of our business today. But it's also, I think, a healthy thing for the entire industry to kind of check out, because it was a much simpler time in all aspects. It was much more open and much more, trying to figure out how the medium was going to evolve and going to mature, what this crazy move to 3D game making was going to turn out to be. And it's happening. We were televising the history of games in kind of real time. And it's really cool to check this stuff out again, and like in this weekend's episode, I'm talking to Gabe Newell about Half-Life,
I
about
saw that.
tell me what Half-Life is, and it's just surreal. It's really nuts. And we're really forgetting who's making games. Like we really have started to just not let people talk about this stuff, and we're not hearing from them. We don't know their names, and we don't know their work environments. I mean, you've got an idea because you're traveling for cover stories and things like that, and Game Informer gives you all kinds of great access. But television's a whole other game. Television is like it's a real window into the unknown. It can be, and I feel like video has become so clenched and so marketed and so like restrained, and people just feel so hemmed in about how they speak and what they say and how they can say it, and every piece of video we see from companies just feels labored over. And
Hmm. So
I don't
sanitized.
and so sanitized. I don't think games get made that way. I think games still get made by a lot of happy accidents and a lot of comedy and a lot of, not manufactured comedy, but just moments of levity and frustration and joy and humanity. And we're just absent that now. And yeah, I think it's important for the industry to kind of find a way back to that some way.
Hmm.
I think that we have weaponized social media dissection around this business, and it, in place of human expression and artistry and a appreciation of the ambition and of the craft of this all. And as cheesy as classic 90s EP goofiness can be sometimes, the core of the show was always, what are you working on and why are you making this, and how is this going to be different from that, and how did you come up with this? And those are core fundamental things that we should get to know from everybody that endeavors to entertain us like this. And it's not just games, it's other things too, but also from the vantage point of where it's getting made. I think it's so important that you're traveling for your pieces. I know you did a big Outlaws thing, right? You went out and talked to
Yeah,
the,
out
the,
in
the
Malmo,
people.
Sweden.
Amazing, right? And what a transcendent, awesome opportunity for you to go there and see the why it feels like it does because of the environment of where it's being built. That's a
Yeah.
profoundly cool thing that you have that perspective.
I mean, the last time I was out in Tokyo, I was visiting Square Enix and getting to walk into this building where so many just undeniably legendary games and sit down with these people who, I'm sitting down. The panel right there is Naoki Hamaguchi, the director of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth,
Yeah,
Tetsuya Nomura, who, name speaks for itself, and Yoshinori Kitase, and just sitting down and kind of picking their brains for 2 hours straight about
yeah,
these amazing games that they've all participated in. And you really do get a sense for it. Like, just walking through Tokyo in general gives you a sense for, like, oh, this is
yeah.
why so many games like this come out from this region, because the environment is so different from what we have out like in North America.
Yes,
It's so vastly different, the feeling, just the vibe of the city. And then when you go into
totally.
the office, you do get a sense for, like, oh, there's like stuff happening in, like it's not just magic, but there is also an element of magic that you get from being in there.
Well, it's honestly, it's the definition of the artistic value of these games. It's that
Hmm.
human touch, even as Metal Gear Solid, was endeavoring to reach a worldwide audience with a real attention paid to North American proclivities and tastes. It was still overtly Japanese, and that's why it's so freaking cool. It's why it's so special. It was so much this product of this thinking and this space and this collaboration. And I genuinely worry as we are moving more and more into, you know, these clenched, nervous announcements from developers who are so worried about backlash at the same time as AI is entering the space, and
Mm.
we're going to see this kind of cultural, flattening, I think, across the world because we're going to be using a lot of the same types of disciplines and tools, and the vernacular is going to be exactly the same. And I don't want that to happen. I want us to protect and preserve and celebrate these unique endeavors, these unique experiences. I don't think indie will ever be that way. I think indie
Mhm.
will always celebrate the human um, sort of element and the creativity that it takes to experiment and to try something different. But I think at the AAA scale, I think we're going to see a lot of. I mean, we already are. We're already seeing a lot of, like, I love what Jeff is doing with the awards and with SGF and all that. SGF was amazing, but I definitely see it um, in the trailers that we're going to. There's like this. It's almost like a chunk of whatever the flavor is. Sometimes it's vampires, sometimes it's zombies, sometimes it's the dystopian humans fighting robots. And it's like this chunk of time where it's six trailers in a row. It's like I don't know what the game was. I don't. They're all the
Mhm.
same. I don't know what that was called, but that was the human fighting robots chunk.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about, like, kind of the clenchedness, the clenched nature of these announcements now. And I
Yeah.
think one of the reasons that we have that is because of Nintendo, because Shigeru Miyamoto came out on the E3 stage
Right.
and the
For
Skyward
music and
Sword demo
yes, and
didn't
Skyward.
work.
Yeah.
And then I think that was maybe one of the early indications to Nintendo that we need to start having a little bit more control over this and not do it in a live environment, which was probably the genesis for the Nintendo Direct, which, now
Right.
every other company has pretty much copied.
Well, I think the expense of live events has definitely. I mean, we all saw the stories on the ad buys for SGF,
Hmm.
but as a participant who went there to have the very experienced orchestration of the experience was really welcome. Down to catered to food trucks that kind of you can make a break to, and you can get food in the middle of a day where you're just looking at 25 things.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal. E3 was a cluster. It was gorgeous and wonderful and exciting and fun, and everybody was there. And I think we need to try to get to a better semblance of that. But it was a cluster, and it was an expensive
So
endeavor for
expensive.
everyone. Yeah, and the booths are exciting. The glitz of it all was awesome. The celebrity elements were incredible. but it was expensive, and I think that's really what has led to people. I, I- I think in retrospect, certainly in those moments where there's technical failures on stage, it's harrowing and frightening, and very discerning and concerning for the people in the moment. But it's also, again, part of the charm of the business too. This is an industry where things work sometimes and don't work sometimes, and sometimes when they don't work, it leads to lots and lots of great new ideas and experimentation that ends up becoming incredibly profoundly important,
Hmm.
and I think it's okay. I think it's okay when stuff does. And honestly, I hope we go back to more live. You were at Nintendo Live last year,
Yeah, that
and
was it was so amazing seeing you up there hosting these performances.
it was wild, man. That was an out of the blue call from Nintendo, who I've worked with,
Wow.
since the first days, first seasons of. I've worked with all of everybody. I've worked with Xbox. We had because we've needed sponsorship along the way. It's never been a show that's been overtly funded and crazy amounts of budget. We're a Canadian show. We're based out of Canada, so we've always had to have just enough to make everything, and everything that we made, you can see it on screen. Nobody got rich making this content over those years. And so we've needed support from the industry, but Nintendo's been a sponsor, and Xbox and Sega and EA and PlayStation. Everybody has participated and helped us get there. But I've had this ongoing friendship and relationship with Nintendo forever. They know I'm a psycho super fan of Nintendo. They know it. They've got decades of my reviews talking about how much I love their stuff, and it's from the heart. I just do, and I got a cold call to go out to Nintendo Live, and I had no idea what the event was really. I thought it was a paid event. I found out at the event that this was all a free gift to people that might also be attending PAX, and it was like, what an absolute joy that was. But there was an event where some new stuff was being talked about, and there was some tournament stuff, and it was great and so missed.
Hmm.
I guess it was like an extended Nintendo booth at PAX or something, but just this idea that it was this huge open space, and it was this communal shared experience around Nintendo. And what an honor it was, man. What a distinct, one of the biggest honors I've ever had in my life, to present this music, to Mario and Zelda music. I
Hmm.
couldn't believe it. Again, one of these things where, my gravestone is just going to be grateful as hell. Like, I'm just so freaking fortunate that I have these amazing opportunities, and I never ever take them for granted. That was
Yeah.
incredible.
I don't
But I
know how
think
your voice
live
held
events
up.
have. I talk a lot, as you are finding out right now in real time.
But like you were doing how many six shows a day hosting them,
Was
or what was
it
it?
was two shows a day, so it ended up
Oh,
being
okay.
six. I think it was 2 shows a day. I don't know. Yeah, what I did find, because I had time in the day that I could go also and walk around PAX and stuff, and I had a
Mm.
camera and everything with me. I had no energy to do anything. I walked around and I'm like, oh, I really should get I have no energy to set up stuff and interview somebody right now. Like, it was all of my energy up on stage. And, yeah, it was nerve wracking. I had all the scripts, and I thought I was going to have to memorize everything, because we came together relatively quickly, and I didn't know, am I off book on all this stuff? Do I have to know all of these things off the top of my head? Because there's a lot of detail that I had to kind of underline and everything. But no, they had a prompter there, and incredible director, and the musicians were wonderful,
Oh,
and
great.
I had great support, and Nintendo people were so encouraging and so wonderful to work with. That was such a marvelous experience. Like, it was so fun.
You did a wonderful job with that. I mean, that was really you had the crowd eating out of the palm of your hand.
Oh man,
And I mean, to be fair, they were kind of an audience that was willing to be excited
yes,
because they were there
yes.
seeing a big band play Mario music and an orchestra play Zelda music. But at the same time, somebody could really have bungled that. And thankfully, you did the exact opposite of that. And
Oh man.
I mean, not just between you and me, we're on a podcast, but the people that I spoke with at Nintendo during the event were very, very happy with the way you were handling it all.
Oh,
So,
that's so kind to hear. I felt that people were enjoying it, but you never know. You just never know. And oh man, that's really nice to hear. That was just an absolute delight. It
mhm.
really was. Oh God, it's really hard to describe. It was just so freaking wonderful. Like the whole thing was just like, how am I here? This is great.
And I'm assuming that you probably were up on stage and you looked out and you saw Takashi Tezuka and Shiro Mori sitting like in the
Yes,
front row on a couple of those shows.
yes, yeah, and they were applauding, and I was effusive about the music, and yeah, it was a surreal thing, Brian. It was a surreal thing, and honestly, I don't know if I know all of the names as well as you do, and I don't know if I know all of the individual contributions as well as you do, and I could see in your tweets because I was following, uh, people's reaction to everything. I wanted to make sure everybody was having a good time, and I could see that it was an emotional thing for you.
Mhm.
And I'm honestly a little bit I'm glad because I'm super deep on Nintendo information and the games that I played, and I know a lot of devs and stuff, but I don't know everything. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't know all of. I mean, I found out that there were composers for all of the music and stuff, but I'm not putting names to music and stuff, and I'm kind of glad that I wasn't fully aware of everything because that would have made me more nervous. Oh my
Well, no
god!
big deal. It
But
was just, the co-creator of Mario, the director of Link to the Past, the guy who was the director of Super Mario Brothers Wonder.
yeah,
No big
I would
deal.
have been. I would have been. I mean, I was already flipping out. That would have been another level of flipping out. Uh, yeah, just amazing, and how humble everybody is too. Right at every level over at Nintendo. Like they're. I don't. They make so many things and they celebrate so many things. I just had Kit and Krista, who used to work at
Mhm.
Nintendo. I just had them on my podcast, and they are never not working on what's coming and building stories around that. And God, it's such good work because they make us care about everything they publish. And that's such a and not everybody can do that. They just can't. It's amazing. Like the thing I keep coming back to is Endless Ocean Luminous, which is really fun. It's a cool game, but it's so much a niche game. But
Mhm.
Nintendo launched that with that same aura and that same love. This is our special game about diving and taking pictures of fish. You're going to love this. And if you want that, you are going to love that. But the thing I love is that Nintendo embraces the story around that, and they work just as hard to PR that as anything else that they make.
Mhm.
That's what Kit and Krista kind of underline, and I feel that from all the people I know at the Treehouse and all the people I've interviewed and talked with, and the developers that I've spoken with, and it's a really truly amazing company.
It is, yeah, and I mean, it's
Yeah.
the reason that we have such passion for the company. It's the reason that I started a podcast
Hmm.
devoted to following the ins and outs of this company,
Yeah.
and it's why so many of us are so passionate.
Totally.
Also, you mentioned Kit and Krista. We have so many friends in common. I'm kind of surprised we did not cross paths sooner. Like
Yeah.
we've recently started getting to know each other a little bit better, but like
Yep.
just like looking at your recent YouTube videos, you have so many of my good friends on there: Daniel Bloodworth, Jake Baldino, Brittany Brombacher, Kit and Krista, Kevin Kenson. Like
Yeah.
so
Yes.
many of my favorite people in this industry, and I'm glad that we all kind of have like this 1 degree of separation with them.
Me too. And the business isn't it's not enormous. It
Hmm.
doesn't take too much effort to start to meet with everybody. But I've become a solo creator over the last little while, basically since the pandemic. And you know what that's like. It's a lot of heads down, just building things and racing from one opportunity, one interview, one game review to the next. And haven't been traveling as much because COVID really interfered with all that. And the events haven't been in person as much. They're starting to kind of happen again a little bit.
Hmm.
But I'm super glad that we have met, and it has been really um, it has been really wonderful to chat with other top of their game people in this space and to witness just the talent and the insight and the great commentary and the great wisdom around all of this. What I'm also recognizing is that Um, I'm not a kid, um, although I play one on TV, none of you guys are kids anymore either. And I think like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have said, oh, well, pay attention to these kids. They're all coming up. They're going to be great. Now you are all pros, and it's really in my face how good you are and how talented you are. And, uh, how much I would love to have you all on my TV show if I were making a TV show, like you guys would all be fantastic pundits and experts that would be talking about all this. So it's been really fun to kind of do that in surrogate form, I guess, through YouTube and I haven't done any live podcasts in a little bit, but I've been posting them to YouTube and other
Mhm.
video channels and stuff, and getting to know everybody. So expect an invite. This long rambling thing. Expect an invite to come and be on my podcast soon, my friend.
Well, I'll be there. I mean, like I said, I've got some trips coming up this month, but I will work my best to fit in any kind of recording that you have going on because
Awesome.
I've enjoyed this conversation so much, and we're not even done. We have a couple more segments ahead of us. So
Yeah, let's go.
we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to be previewing Nintendo's second half of 2024. We will be right back. Can you believe it? We are already halfway through 2024. It feels like the year just started not too long ago, but here we are, first week of July. And we're going to look back a little bit at the first half of Nintendo's 2024, but then we're going to spend the primary chunk of this segment talking about what's ahead for Nintendo now that the Nintendo Direct is in the rearview mirror. So, Victor, I'm going to run down probably the biggest Switch games of 2024 so far, and feel free to throw out any that I miss that
Sure.
maybe stuck out to you as impactful or worth
Yep.
discussing. But I'm just going to kind of run down chronologically some of the games that came out this year so far, just so we can
Cool.
get our bearings. So we have Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, RZ: Jewel of the Faramore.
Mm-hmm.
We have Balatro, Penny's Big Breakaway, Unicorn Overlord, Princess Peach Showtime, Pepper Grinder, Grounded, so Xbox exclusive coming over to Switch,
Right.
Tales of Panzera Zao,
Yep.
Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. Did I miss any big ones that
I, th-
immediately come
I
to mind?
No, I think you got them all, and I'm glad that you added the Lost Crown to the Switch. That's where I played the game. It was amazing on the Switch. They did a great job on that port. I had it on PS5 as well, where it was a little bit shinier, but it was so rad to be able to take that game anywhere. And what a misstep to not launch on Steam with the Steam Deck out there. And I
Was
know
it not on Steam?
it was not. It's launching soon on Steam.
What a weird thing.
I know. I played a bunch of those games on the Steam Deck, and that's a real challenge to the Switch too. At this point, there's a lot of PC handheld devices that are in that space right now, and the indies, which I don't know about you, but I went to the Switch One for a lot of indie stuff,
Oh, yeah.
tons, right? Like lots of cool things that would bubble up to the Switch. It was a great feeding ground for that. But now it's different. If stuff runs a bit better on a Steam Deck or an ROG Ally or something like that, it's like I think I might play it over there.
Yeah, the age is really starting to show on the Switch. I had Hades on Switch because I was like, oh, it's perfect for that. And
Yeah.
then I saw like the load times compared to like the Steam version, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get it on Steam as well, and because now I have a
Hmm.
Steam Deck. But one
Yeah.
that I actually pointed out here that I have not played, but I saw that you had played, and I want you to just give me a brief like 2-minute review of this game.
Yeah.
RZ: Jewel of the Faramore, because like
Yeah.
it's a game I've been meaning to check out. I have a copy of it. I just haven't had the time to get around to it. So like, what is this
Yeah.
game all about?
Well, it is a pseudo sequel, I guess, to the Legend of Zelda games that were made for the Philips CDI platform. And so
Mm.
it's a crazy concept, made by the Dopster, I think the handle is. I forget his name right now. It's not tip of my tongue. But I interviewed those guys, and limited run, under the guidance of producer Audie Sorley, who a lot of people will recognize from the Digital Foundry videos and stuff, but he also works at Limited Run. And it was just a passion project. A guy that saw those games initially and said, I want to remake them, or I want to remaster them. And so he went, I bet, and did this fan project of remastering the Zelda games, and got the attention of people. And then Limited Run saw that he was working on this whole new idea to kind of make this pseudo sequel about this character that's running around and collecting all of these different items. But everything is kind of hand drawn and rough edged, and it's almost like Microsoft Paint in a way is
Hmm.
animated, you know. So there's some really crazy dimensions on faces and stuff during the cut sequences, but they're so charming because it's so handmade, and that roughness really adds to what you're experiencing. But what they've done is they modernized the mechanics and some of the objectives and stuff. So it's still a fun core kind of Metroidvania RPG light kind of thing. So the 2D Zelda type of experience, jumping up on platforms and taking out enemies and getting new equipment and new spells and things that make you a little bit more powerful. But honestly, the real treat of it are these just whacked out crazy cut sequences that are so anachronistic and out of they just don't make sense in 2024, and that's
Yeah.
why they're so cool. They're just like, what am I looking at? I've got this talking horse, and the camera's never still either, so you're moving in and out
Yeah.
and all these weird characters and stuff. It's really crazy, but I really enjoyed it. I really had a fun time playing that game.
So I looked it up while you were talking. The developer is CDI Software,
Yeah, that's right.
and
But he's one guy though, and
yeah,
then he
so
got some
Seth
support.
Fulkerson, it looks like is the
Seth,
name.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, really. And I got a chance to interview Seth and Audi about this project, and I just love the story of it. And I know Limited Run gets a lot of crap for um, how many copies of a game they make, or stuff comes in and it's not exactly what they were said it was going to be in a
Mhm.
thing. But there's also so much effort at Limited Run to preserve these things and to come up with these crazy projects, and I think that's awesome. I applaud that ambition, and no company out there does this thing perfectly every single time, but Limited Run, I think, has done a really good job at carving out this niche. And honestly, they have a real opportunity as more and more studios start to favor digital releases to come up with new ways to preserve this idea of physical, and make these things collectible forever. I'm playing their Rocket Knight Adventures Switch game right now, actually,
Oh,
which is
okay.
terrific on the Switch. Collecting the Konami classic 2D games for the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, and they have the Japanese version of Sparkster on there as well. But they've added and stuff that I've been asking the Limited Run people to do. They've added some museum pieces, so they have the boxes and they have some concept art and things like that. That's the stuff that really is valuable in those
Oh,
those
for sure.
collections and stuff. Yeah,
That's why I love the work that Digital Eclipse is doing so
me
much with
too.
like Atari
Yeah.
50 and Cowabunga Collection and Street Fighter 30th anniversary. Like they've done such amazing work and they're just
Yes.
leaning fully into it now at this point.
Yes. I had both Jordan Mechner talking about Prince of Persia right around when the Lost Crown came out, and also the
Jeff Minter.
Karateka.
Oh no.
And
Oh,
Jeff Minter as well, yeah. And then I had Jeff Minter on talking about the Jeff Minter collection, and God, I love those conversations so much. Just seminal work, and I feel like you could almost make a Gold Master series about the making of the Gold Master series at this point. Like the efforts that Digital Eclipse is doing to put these things together is just stunning, and it really needs to be celebrated.
and a
Such a cool company.
shameless plug. We actually did have a feature on the making of the Gold Master series in our latest issue of Game Informer.
Right on. That's great.
So yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
they're great over there, man.
really cool behind the scenes look at that, and they are incredible. And I'm so happy that they're getting like more and more cracks at making like original stuff as well. Like Mighty Morphin
Yeah,
Power Rangers Rita's God, that's a mouthful. Mighty
yeah,
Morphin Power Rangers Rita's Rewind is
yeah,
their original creation, but it's just based on like all the cool stuff that these developers wish they could have done back in the 90s. Like they couldn't do like some of these different effects and different perspectives, like the first person stuff and the kind of stuff that looks like it's mode 7, but it's actually way more sophisticated than mode
yeah,
7.
yeah.
So that I'm
People need to
just
do
thrilled
themselves
about
a
it.
favor and dig into their Digital Eclipse history and the games that they've made, because they were, not only were they always bringing classics to current, like collections of old Midway games on Game Boy or whatever, but they also were contracted to do a whole bunch of licensed stuff, and they've done Spider-Man games, and they've just
Hmm.
been contributing to video games in some profound ways forever and ever and ever. And so this new kind of idea of them being a part of Atari, and Atari trying to, you know, continue its relevancy in the modern age, is a really exciting story. It is
Yeah.
a dip back in trying to preserve what was crafted and successful before for new players. But there's also a lot of investment in lots of cool new ideas and things like that. And that company is up to it, like they're hiring, and they're challenging themselves with new ideas and new projects. And they've been a persistent force. That's what's, I think, people don't really recognize about Digital Eclipse, and a constantly evolving, interesting company that's always coming up with new ways to tackle the question of what is a video game.
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan of them.
I'm sure that people who listen to this podcast every week are rolling their eyes right now because there's a few subjects that I touch on quite a bit. There's my love of Breath of the Wild and Ocarina of Time. There's my
Yeah,
love of Super Mario World, and
yeah,
there is my admiration of Digital Eclipse. And I think that
wicked
you know,
man.
I always find a way to get on to like singing the praises of that company. I did it last week, and I'm doing it again this week because last week we had the announcement of the Atari 50 anniversary celebration expanded edition.
Yeah,
So I was like, "Oh, well, yeah,
that's a
of course it's
mouthful.
gonna be awesome because of,
Yeah,
it's them."
yeah.
So first up, now that before we jump into, like, what is still to come for Nintendo in 2024, how would you grade their year to this point? We'll leave off, like,
Mm.
announcements just for the sake of it, like, things just going purely off games that have been released to this point in the year.
Well, because the indie equation is a little bit more confusing now for Nintendo Switch, there are just so many different ways. It was my preferred way to play indie. I don't know if it is every time now. That's a little bit more of a muted kind of element in this.
Mhm.
Judging based on their first party contributions, I really enjoyed the Princess Peach game. I think I gave it an 8. It was a really cool experience, and about freaking time. I love Paper Mario. I mean, Paper Mario, I think, would be the story of 2024 if it was a new game. It's that good. And I liked Mario versus Donkey Kong quite a bit, but those aren't the bangers that we've associated with Nintendo in previous years. Like, they had an
Especially in the
incredible
Switch
year
era.
last year. Yeah, in the Switch era. And last year, um, because of Tears, certainly at the forefront, but last year was a banger year for Nintendo. It was just, they had like 19 different IP that they touched on. They ran the gamut. I mean, even their F-Zero 99 was just an
Yeah.
outstanding celebration. Started with Metroid Prime Remastered, which was a 10 out of 10 for me. That was just incredible. Paper
It's
Mario is pretty close to that.
Metroid Prime Remastered is tied for my highest review score that I've given at Game Informer. I gave it a
Yeah.
9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's perfection, like it's just
So good.
so. I bought it for Scott. I went and I bought the physical game and said, "Here you go, bud. You need to have this on your Switch. It's gorgeous." And yeah, no, I was blown away, especially when you throw in Wonder and like Fire Emblem. They had every bloody
Mhm.
thing last year. It was just insane. They're not having quite that year this year so far, but what's coming is really exciting. So the first half, I would say, is probably, I usually rate it a 10, so I would probably give it about a 7.5 or an 8 from
Mhm.
Nintendo. But that's only because of the caliber of years and the caliber of releases that we have come to expect from this company. They're just amazing.
Yeah, I when I do these like kind of quarterly or half year evaluations, I usually try to do like on a letter grade just to differentiate it. So
Yeah,
I think I'm probably in line with you. If we're equating like the percentages to letter grades, like 80% is a B.
yeah,
I'm probably right there with you. I'd probably say C plus B minus
yeah,
for their year so far, just based purely off the games that have come out already.
yes, yes,
They've had some really good third party support actually. Like we talked about Prince of Persia, we talked about Balatro.
Yeah,
those games I think are really complementing the Nintendo first party offerings super
totally.
well. Balatro is fantastic on the Switch. And like you said, Prince of Persia, yeah, I've joked about how, the Switch version has exclusive loading screens, but
Yeah,
it is a very good way to play it. I have not had a problem with it in any way. Whereas, like, sometimes like Mortal Kombat 1, for example, comes over and it's
yeah,
like, oh, this is definitely
yeah.
the worst way to play this game. But while we're on the topic of how good of a year Nintendo had last year, and it was just a great year for game releases in general.
Oh, it was
Was
insane.
What
It
was your
was
game of the year last year? Like both Nintendo or industry wide?
Spider-Man 2. And part of that was, I mean, I love superhero video games. And I always say that
Same.
Spider-Man is the best character for video games because just moving as the character is unbelievably fun. And you can stretch to the 2D stuff and everything. I find that whenever I play a good Spider-Man game, every game I play after, I want to web zip. I want to
Yeah.
swing. I press whether it's a sports game or whatever, I want to just zip around because it's so much freaking fun. But what I loved especially about Spider-Man 2 was its editing, was its just removal of breath of, or like, there was no wasted second in Spider-Man 2. And people may have issues with the content or some of the decisions or some of the um, familiarity of the experience, but I don't know. I loved everywhere that they took us in the story and all of the abilities that we had, and it was just gorgeous. I
Mhm.
just felt like really transported by that experience, and I am not exhausted on superhero content. I
Not
think
at
that
all.
superheroes translate really well to the interactive world.
I mean, looking over your
And
shoulder from my perspective, I think it's safe to say you're a fan of superhero content. For people watching
I,
or listening to the audio version, he has probably about 150 figures
I
from
do.
Marvel, DC, everything set up behind
The
him.
Turtles, yes, I've got a bunch out there. Yeah, no, I love superhero stuff. So the Spider-Man 2 was up there. Tears was up there. Like it's hard for me to even recall all of the incredible stuff that we had in 2023. Um, name some of the other ones.
Baldur's Gate,
Oh God,
uh,
that was incredible. Yeah,
Street
yeah,
Fighter
Baldur's Gate 3.
6,
Yes, that was.
Sea of Stars.
Yeah, there were so many that I almost didn't do. Like, we do a yearly thing called the Rocket and Reagan Awards. I was like on the verge of like, what's the point? There, like, every one of these is a game of the year. Like, there's no not good, freaking fantastic thing that we have here.
It was
It
so
was
good
so
last
good.
year.
It was so good.
Resident Evil 4 remake.
Yes, Fire Emblem Engage was
Yeah,
incredible. That
that's basically how the year started.
yeah, it was like, I remember playing. I'm like, what the hell is happening? Hey, you don't have a January game that's this good. This is ridiculous. Look at this game. It's so beautiful. Yeah. No, we were very, I think, overly spoiled last year. I think we were benefactors of the overhiring that probably happened through 2020, and everybody going, oh, everybody wants to buy video games now. And then some of the realities of time and budget started to come crashing down for a lot of people.
And then Alan Wake 2, another
Oh,
absolute
yeah.
banger.
And Super Mario Brothers Wonder. And
Yeah.
it's amazing into my mind how much those two games are similar for me. How
Hmm.
just whacked out and
Yeah.
crazy, you know, psychologically weird and twisted and brief and contained. And after Baldur's Gate 3 and Tears, I really relished that. I really kind of liked the idea that I could have a complete, beautiful experience and not be in something for 200 hours, and Spider-Man 2 is why. And that's a big part of the reason why I loved it. I never felt the time. And there were moments in both Baldur's Gate and Tears where I'm like, I've been here a long time. I've been, in Tears, I'd be up climbing a mountain in the dark, underground, and I'm like, I can't see where I'm going, and it's this thing again. I'm here again. How did I get? I'm out of the glowberries and all that. I can't see where I'm going, and I hope I'm gonna find the end of this mountain, and then I'd fall, and I'm like, oh my god! But I kept going.
I will say that Tears of the Kingdom, when I played that, I was like, nothing's going to beat that this year.
Yeah.
The only thing that came close for me was, in fact, Spider-Man 2.
Hmm.
And you remember Spider-Man 1, Marvel Spider-Man 1, the first Insomniac game, came out in 2018.
Yeah.
And that year was also very good. That was the year that we got God of War, the first of
Right.
the soft reboot, and then
Mm.
also Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man 1 was my game of the year in 2018. That's how much I
Yeah.
love that series. So it came close, but Tears of the Kingdom was ultimately my game of the year last year.
Yeah.
It's just I don't
There
know.
was no wrong choice. That's why I was like, why am I doing this? They're all great. They're all game of the year. Game of the year. Yes. Yeah. They're all great.
That should have been your answer. What was your game of the year last year? Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess that begs the question: what's your game of the year so far? We'll do one Switch only and one overall.
Oh man. Prince of Persia's up there for sure.
Oh,
Um, I've God, when you ask that, when I don't have all the names in front of me, because it's,
so just
when you
rattle them
review
off instead.
thousands of things, list out some more that have come out in 2024 because I don't have any of the names in front of me
Well,
right
here,
now.
let me bring up my list. I'm going to get my phone out here, and I keep a list, a running list. So here,
Yeah.
I'll just read you my my top 10 so far.
Okay.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, number
Yeah. I mean,
one.
that's insane. Yeah. Keep
Like a
going.
Dragon, Infinite Wealth.
That took too long to get going. I mean, it's a
Okay.
beautiful game, but I was like, come on. I streamed it for hours. I'm like, what is happening? Let's go.
Balatro, mentioned that.
Yep.
Uh, Sleeper hit for me, Mini Shoot Adventures. Have you heard about this one?
No, I haven't.
So it's Steam only for now, but it would be a perfect fit for Switch. Think Link to the Past, but it is you're a spaceship kind of cruising around, and it's a top-down bullet hell.
I I have heard of this, but I haven't played this. I definitely want to. That sounds incredible. I'm
One of
going to
my favorite
download this
games of the
after.
year. So
Okay.
good. It's only on Steam. Again, it would be a huge misstep if they did not bring it to
I'm
a
sure
Nintendo
September Direct,
platform. Yeah.
it'll be announced. I'm sure.
Persona 3 Reload.
Yep.
I'm a big sports fan, so MLB The Show 24 is up there
Oh
for me
yeah,
as
that
well.
I keep going back. I just played that with my daughter. We went out and played catch, and then we came and so I think it was on Father's Day, and I said, "Okay, we're
Aw.
gonna play the baseball video game now. Is that okay?" And she's like, "Okay, Dad." But we had a pretty good time.
Freedom Planet 2. If you're an old school Sonic fan, the Freedom Planet
Yeah,
games are phenomenal. Tekken 8, Mario vs. Donkey
Tekken 8
Kong.
was amazing. Yep.
Yeah, there's some good ones that have come out this year that aren't just exclusive to Switch.
I think out of those, it's Rebirth for me,
Me
which
too.
is stunning. Yeah, just a beautiful accomplishment, much bigger and grander and more open than Remake, which I honestly just had wrapped up just before I jumped onto Rebirth, and it was great to have that. Juxtaposition and to have both of them because it isn't just a continuation of what we knew. It is like, no, we're going to open the mechanics and we're going to give you a lot more things that you can do. And that really opens the question to how they're going to. And I don't know if they're going to conclude it in the third one. Who knows what they're going to do because these worlds seem to stretch forever, as we know now. But yeah, Rebirth is amazing. The only thing that I think might hold it back a little bit is that we all know it's the Empire Strikes Back.
Hmm.
As seminal as that is, you can't know it's Empire until you've got them all, and then you go back and go, oh yeah, that's what I like the most.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I loved Rebirth. I tweeted this when I first finished it. It was like it's going to take something really special to dethrone Final Fantasy VII Rebirth for me by the end of this year. And
yeah,
we've got some stuff on the horizon here that we're going to talk about in a moment. But
yep.
what about Switch only? If it's just games you can play on your Switch, what is your game of the year for that?
So far, out of what I played, it's Paper Mario.
Mm.
And that's kind of a cheap out in a way because it's a 20-year-old game. But the GameCube didn't sell that many units. It sold 20 million units, which is a tiny little fraction of what the Switch influence is.
Yeah, you could
And
take
this
a
is a
100
game,
million away from the Switch, and you would still have more than the GameCube.
yeah, and this is a game that deserves to be experienced. It's a game that deserves to be played. It really legitimizes the idea that Mario is much more than a 2D platformer.
Hmm.
Obviously, we know that. Not everybody does. And I think this is the game you put in front. Out of all of the RPGs, all of the other great things, and I'm looking forward to Mario and Luigi Brothership, but out of all of the other Mario tangents, this is the one, you know? And that was really underlined to play it again on the Switch.
Hmm. For me, it's Balatro.
Yeah.
I just think I don't know how much you've dug into that, but like,
Honestly, I haven't. That's one that I keep wanting to get to, but all I hear about it is don't play it. It's going to take over your life.
well, I mentioned how much I travel, and I've talked about,
Yeah.
again, another thing that I talk way too much about on this show that people are probably like, "Oh, here he goes again." My
Yeah.
plane
It's the
games.
job, man. It's
Yeah.
the job. Yeah.
My plane games, for the longest time, it was Vampire Survivors. I would just fire
Yeah.
that up and then
Yeah.
basically time travel my way through that flight because it would just time would go so fast when I'm
Oh, I
playing
know.
that game.
Yes.
Balatro has joined Vampire Survivors as like the game that I fire up when I'm like, oh, I need to kill like 4 hours on the way to LA. What do I
Yeah.
want to play? And it's, oh, well, obviously that.
Is Animal Well on the Switch? Because I've been playing that on the
No,
deck
it's not.
and it isn't. Okay, because that game is incredible and that's a
It really
great
is.
kill the time experience. But that Bzzzt game that's coming, it's coming to the Switch pretty soon. I've got that on the deck and
Oh
it's
yeah,
available on Steam.
I've
And
heard
that's
of
a
that
cool
one.
little, yeah, it's like a robot Meat Boy, you know.
Mm.
I love robot games. You know, I'm a Clank stan. Is that what the kids say? I'm a
Yeah,
Clank
that's what
stan.
they say. At
Yeah.
least that's
So
what I think. I don't know. I'm not a kid
yeah.
anymore, so
But I like that kind of stuff. So Bzzzt is actually one of those great little pickups for that kind of thing. But Animal Well, if you haven't started playing that, is amazing.
I started it on
Super stunning game.
PS5. Unbelievable. I wish that it was on Switch because it is such a perfect fit for that. I'm surprised that it's not
Totally.
on Switch, but
It'll be.
eventually it will
Probably
be.
September Direct. We're going to hear about that.
Hopefully Hollow Knight Silk Song eventually as well, because
Hmm.
goodness gracious.
Yeah, big time.
So before we dive into what is coming for Nintendo the second half, what about the Nintendo Direct? We finally got one. Was it worth the wait?
Oh, it was terrific. It was unexpectedly wonderful, and filled with all kinds of terrific variety. Games of every scale, and a huge surprise. Not surprised by Metroid. Surprised. No, not surprised by Metroid. But it's like we're all thinking that it will be multi-platform, and that's I think what we're waiting for that announcement. Like
Hmm.
we're all waiting to find out what's coming up next. Um, but after talking a little bit about it with friends across the industry, I do think that we're going to get another direct that really kind of not necessarily puts a closure on the machine, but really starts to get us to think about the pivot. I actually think we're going to get two. I think we are probably going to get something early in 2025 that is much more Switch focused, and we'll get some cool stealth drops. I'm starting to think that we're going to get Metroid Prime 2 stealth dropped in September, the remaster, and a 3 in the following direct, which will then pivot us towards the direct that announces what Switch 2 is going to be. But this direct was terrific. I was really surprised to see a new Mario and Luigi game with Brothership. And of course, I'm surprised and very happy that we're getting to play as Zelda in Echoes of Wisdom. That game looks terrific. It looks like they're, almost imbuing a little bit of the imagination, the Minecraftian imagination of Tears into a top-down 2D core Zelda experience. And that just seems so clever and ambitious, and also very surprising because Aonuma had been out there talking about and you probably got the quote of Zelda. This is the way we think of Zelda now. It's Tears and bigger from here. And so that's what I was expecting. I was not expecting a new Zelda game in 2024 that let you play a Zelda that was also retro in its scope. And so multi-tiered surprise there, and
Yeah,
very happy about that. Yeah.
it was a
But to see
fantastic
them
Direct.
fantastic. Marvel versus Capcom was amazing.
Oh yeah.
Same kind of energy as the Power Rangers in the Xbox showcase. Like, wow, that's an amazing surprise. Like this amazing 2D show-stopping moment in this 3D, cavalcade of titles. Maybe a little less so in the Switch case. But it's like this stop and realization that, oh my God, 2D is really important. But I'm a way bigger Marvel fan than I am a Power Rangers fan. So I'm
Mm.
really excited about the collection. Yeah, it was great. I love the Dragon Quest HD 3 HD 2D thing. That's going to be amazing too.
Yeah, I got my hands on that while I was out at Summer Game Fest. I don't know if you were able to do that as well, but
No, that's when I couldn't. No,
yeah, it's
I couldn't.
it,
You couldn't get to everything.
it was impossible. Like we had three people out there, and we still had to turn down appointments because it was just such a crowded
Yep.
just Tetrising together various schedules to make it so like, oh, can you do this? Can you do this? I tried to leave
Yeah.
space between so I could create like my articles after I saw something. And then like something would come up and be like, well, we have to take that. So it's like, of course I need to take this interview with Hidetaka Miyazaki. So like, I guess I'm
Yeah.
going to not have a break between these two things.
Totally. No, what I think should have been done, if this can't scale to E3, and maybe it doesn't need to, I think that the press conferences should be before SGF,
Hmm.
and then we get hands on by whatever SGF allows us for, and then I feel like some of the energy of the hands on should be injected into an SGF rap show that Jeff hosts,
Mm.
and so kind of flipping it around because the big reveals are going to happen from the people that hold the cards close to their chest. They're just going to be there. But they can be touched on again, or there could be a deeper thing if Jeff does this show after the hands on. And I haven't said any of this to Jeff, but I'm thinking that the smaller announcements of SGF, and by nature they're going to be, plus the developer direct or the indie direct stuff, uh, isn't the boost for the weekend that people on the outside really want, But when you're on playing the games, it's like, oh my God, like playing Replaced at SGF was insane. It was so good. And Animal Well a couple of years ago. They're smaller titles, but they're really amazing when you get your hands on them. So I don't know. I've been trying to think of it, but it was very disruptive to put the Xbox thing in the middle of the
Hmm.
weekend and leave the event, the Playdays event, and leave the hands on of all this stuff. It was great to go to the Xbox presser. Did you go?
I went to the mixer that happened the night before,
Yeah.
and got to talk to Jeff a little bit, got to talk to Phil for a little bit, but I did not
Yeah.
end up going to the presser that morning because, like you said, it was kind of way out there in Hollywood, right? So it was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
kind of hard when I have appointments like a half hour after it concludes and it's LA.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
getting from anywhere to another place in LA is gonna, it could take 20 minutes or it could take an hour.
Yeah, no, and I thought about not going, but I also wanted that experience. It was really fun to share and all that. And
Yeah,
Xbox, man, they had something special for that.
they had a great
Um,
showcase. They really did.
yeah, and the whole event, the whole weekend was great. But the only thing I would say is like put the big showstoppers, just like E3 used to do with these big events, and Nintendo and PlayStation should be there too. Let's just do it. If they're videos, that's fine. Bring us to their things. Let's have these mixers before the night before. They don't have to be huge Foo Fighters at the Dodger Stadium things. They could just be smaller. Let's just celebrate this together. And then there's hands on with a lot of this stuff in a contained, controlled way, like SGF was. But we don't have to leave the space to run to one thing and run to another.
Yeah, it's a little
And
too
I
spread
think
out now.
yeah, and then Jeff should run his show at the conclusion of it and kind of wrap up all of what's been announced and talk a little bit of, just have a great kind of party at the end of it. And then people get that takeaway after SGF, plus all of the bites from all of us talking about stuff. That's going to be a really big punch of information for everybody instead of this. This is big, this isn't big, this is big, this isn't big, this is huge, this is open, it's over there, and then this is it. And then it's like at the end, it's like, what happened?
It is funny how like when you're on the ground at E3 or previously E3, now Summer Game Fest, you despite being there in person, you feel about the least clued in person
Yeah.
because like you're too close to it almost. It's like
Yes.
I was sharing an Uber with somebody. They're like, "Oh, did you see this got announced?" I'm like, "Wait, what? When did that happen?" It's like, "Oh, like 2 days
Yeah.
ago." And I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
no, I had no idea. I was
Yes.
too busy like being in appointments."
Yeah. I think in general that's what we've transitioned to is this much more sporadic thing. And there's a lot of disconnect from announcement to announcement. I can't keep it all straight. We're also regardless if you're working for Game Informer or you're IGN or the millions of different properties that they have, or you're just running an indie YouTube channel or whatever, we're all understaffed. We all have too
Mm,
many things to try to pay attention to. The games are very long, a lot of them, and if we've got reviews on our plate, plus we're trying to cover some news and stuff, which is par for the course for anybody on the media side. It's just really hard to keep track of it all, and I think the events should be cognizant of that and be working a little bit more collectively to make that whole stretch of information hit as powerfully as it possibly can. I really I need to talk with Jeff. I haven't had a conversation with him, but there are not that many people that have got the amount of years going to these things that I have, and he
Yeah.
has, he's been to all of this stuff too.
Yeah, I think that does reflect in the Summer Game Fest product. I will say that this year was far and away the best Summer Game Fest has been in terms of like the on the ground experience.
It was awesome. And it was great to see you. It was great to, nobody had long times for catch ups and conversations because we're all running from thing to thing, but so freaking important, And then because we went there, it converts to this, and
Hmm.
we're having this convo today, and you will definitely be on my podcast soon. And we need that, we need to kind
Yeah.
of break out of our little silos and our circles and touch base and connect around this stuff. It's just value for us as people that create, and it's value for people that listen to our work, and follow our stuff.
I feel like I saw you probably no fewer than 15 times at Summer Game Fest. It was just like one of us was on the way to an appointment, like kind of
Yeah.
speed walking, and it's just like a quick tap on the shoulder. Hey, man, good to see you. All right, see
Yeah.
you later.
Yeah, it was great to meet and like actually connect, Yeah, because I saw that you were at the Nintendo Live last year, and that really meant a lot to me. The kind things that you were tweeting, it was like, wow, man, this is a super fan of this material, and it really added to my sense of uh, just awe and gratefulness that I had this opportunity, and yeah, yeah. So it was great to connect
It
and build a
absolutely
friendship.
was.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
been awesome,
totally.
and I'm glad that we're finally sitting down and collaborating here today.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
it's
and I have a Game Informer story too. I
oh
don't know if
really?
you know this.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
uh, as we were pitching the show, we sent a demo tape to Game Informer with a whole breakdown on everything, and they put an article in the magazine in 1995, and I think it was Paul. He passed away from cancer,
Yeah,
but his
yeah,
first name was Paul. Paul, I think Paul
yeah.
Anderson is
Anderson.
yeah, and Reiner and Andy Mack. They just talked about EP, and they put some photos up, and they quoted me, and I was a waiter at that time, and it was such a thrill to have the idea be taken seriously, and for this magazine of great import across the industry to take a moment to talk about what EP might be, because it wasn't yet. But I took it to my job in the restaurant. I took the article, I photocopied it, and I stuck it on the staff bulletin board. And I said, "This is what I'm doing, guys. I'm doing this. I'm trying to build this thing." And it was, yeah, incredibly important. And I've certainly had time to thank all of those guys over the years for uh, that moment of kind support. That moment of, because they didn't know. Who knew? I didn't know. Nobody knew that, when you're building a brand new brand or a brand new concept like that, what's going to become of it all. But
Yeah.
it was really wonderful. So I've always loved Game Informer, and it was a lot of that is wrapped up in that emotion, that kind of like, good luck, kid. It was very kind of the magazine to do that.
Well, I'm glad that they took that approach because, like, we've always kind of at the magazine tried to be kind of on the tastemaker side of like,
Yeah.
here's something cool that you maybe don't know about. Like, I think that the one that if I'm not mistaken, this was before my time, so I'm trying to recall if this was one of the ones that like kind of Game Informer discovered, quote unquote. But Bastion was like
Oh
one
wow.
that
Yeah.
Game Informer was like, oh, this game seems pretty cool, and then of course it exploded, and the studio now, Supergiant, is just fantastic, making Hades and Transistor and all
Yes.
those games. But yeah, like we've always tried to be that for like smaller, lesser known games, and I'm glad that they carried that philosophy all the way back to 1995, being like, hey, like there's this cool idea with this guy who seems really passionate and knowledgeable. Like, let's highlight it.
Yeah, it was surreal, man. And of course I've seen those guys and become friends with them over the years. And both Reiner and Mac are on the other side
Mhm.
now, working
Yeah.
at big companies. Uh, yeah, but I think the magazine and the digital, like, you guys all have this history of just celebrating all aspects, the
Mm.
GI Spy and being everywhere with this stuff and the access that you are all um, granted and I feel you can see it in the work. You feel great privilege and responsibility for it. You never squander it. Any of your team members ever have done that, and you've like the shows, given us great access into these worlds, into these people, and I think it's amazing that that Game Informer has been able to be this persistent force out there and survive all of the tumult and change that's happened across media out there. And I know it's not always easy. I know that there's lots of transitional things that make it even more difficult, but it's good that it's happening. It's good that your parent company believes in it, and you have that distribution, and you have that physicalized distribution as well. I think
Mm.
it's wonderful. It's
Well,
really wonderful.
thank you so much. I don't even know what to say to that because it was so nice and means so much coming from you. So thank you. I appreciate it. It's humbling to be a part of the team, honestly, and a part of the legacy. And it's not something, like I said earlier, it's not something I ever take for granted, even in the hard, more difficult times
Yeah,
where
yeah.
wondering how the heck we're going to get this stuff done.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I think that uh, there's some parody. I think in the stories of Game Informer and EP, because we're based out in cities that aren't necessarily in the heart of the media space or the game making space, even for that
Yeah.
matter. We're kind of like in these different sort of disparate towns that. The I mean, Vancouver's very expensive now, but we had this ability to just build this stuff, and I took advantage of all of the incredible production talent that's in the city because of all the films and TV shows that film here,
Hmm.
and got lots of great wisdom from people there. But I think you guys have just been able to be your own thing where you are, and craft your work without all of the interference of a San Francisco or a Los Angeles. Because I see those people in those cities, there's excellent work being done there, but it also feels like it's also the epicenter for lots of change, and
A lot
people
of
moving
stuff.
from this job to that job to this job to this job, and that's closed down and that's closed down. Not saying that you guys haven't gone through that and we haven't gone through that, but it's maybe a little less our day to day, you know?
Yeah, and I think that was one of the key reasons that Andy McNamara, the former editor in chief of Game Informer, I think he was editor in chief for like 28 years, which is
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
He had the option, I think, at one point in like the 2000s to relocate to somewhere like San Francisco. And
Yeah.
he looked at it and it was like, we're not going to be able to pay like a comparable living wage in a city like that. And there's also so
Right.
much change happening right there. We have families in Minnesota. Let's just stay here. We have an office space. We have all this other stuff. And that was ultimately why I think Game Informer is just stayed in
Yeah.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
And
I think it
it's
was a wise
same with
decision.
us in Canada, in Vancouver. Like, the production costs for us to have moved to a different city, and certainly I've entertained the idea before, but a big part of our longevity is reining things in and keeping things kind of lean and realistic and um, not growing. It's
Mm.
so huge that it buckles. It's very tough. It's very challenging, and we're seeing that across the spectrum everywhere: movie studios, animation studios, visual effects, television media of every stripe, and it's just. And AI hasn't really entered the arena yet, like
Mm.
it's coming.
Who
So it's
knows how
it's
that's going to affect everything.
every freaking thing, yeah.
Uh, so, Victor, let's dig into what's on the horizon for Switch owners as we move into this second half of the year. We'll just quickly go
Cool.
down month by month, and then at the end, we'll kind of use it as a discussion point, just laying everything out on the table right here. July
Yeah.
is surprisingly a busy month for Switch. So we
Right.
have Legend of Heroes, Trails Through Daybreak, Ace Combat 7, Skies Unknown,
Yep.
Darkest Dungeon 2, Deliver Us the Moon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate,
Yep.
Nintendo World Championships NES Edition,
Yep.
the new Denpa Men, a Ranger, a role puzzling adventure, Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus, and One Piece Odyssey. So shocking how many games are
That's a
coming to
lot of
Switch
titles.
in July.
Yeah.
August is not so busy. August has Star Wars Bounty Hunter, Cat Quest 3, and SteamWorld Heist 2.
Yes.
Then September has Ace Attorney Investigations Collection, Yars Rising, Wild Bastards, Harry Potter Quidditch Champions, Disney Epic Mickey Rebrushed, Lollipop Chainsaw Repop, and of course, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom.
That's a good
Uh,
month
that is a
for
good month as
Switch.
well.
Yeah.
October has Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time, Super Mario Party Jamboree, which we didn't even
Yep.
talk about when we were recapping kind of like our overall thoughts about the Nintendo Direct.
Yep.
Romancing Saga 2, Revenge of the Seven, Atari 50, the Anniversary Celebration Expanded Edition, and Sonic X Shadow Generations. And then finally, November, because I don't think there's any December release dates for the Switch just yet. But
Not yet. Yeah.
November has Farmagia, Mario and Luigi Brothership, Anton Blast, and Dragon Quest III HD 2D
Oh,
Remake.
that's some good stuff there.
Yeah, and then we have
Yeah.
just a list of games that don't have release dates but are tentatively scheduled for 2024. Blazing Strike, Fairy Tale 2, Fantasian Neo Dimension, Lego Horizon Adventures, Looney
Yep.
Tunes Wacky World of Sports, Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics, Metal Slug Tactics, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Rita's Rewind, Rift of the Necrodancer, Rugrats Adventures in Gameland, Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered, Shantae Adventure, or sorry, Shantae Advance, Risky Revolution, Slay
Cool.
the Princess, The Pristine Cut, Stray, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutants Unleashed, The Plucky Squire, and Time Flies. So a lot of stuff coming in the next 6 months,
Yeah.
theoretically. I mean, obviously, there's always a chance for delays. There's always a chance for those 2024 games that just don't have a release date to be like, oh, yeah, by the way, now we're 2025. But now
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
have a more complete picture of the year that Switch owners have ahead of them, how do you feel about 2024 as a whole?
Oh, there's some great stuff headed our way. Yeah, some really, really cool big titles and some excellent looking indie games as well. I think people are going to be super excited playing lots of different games in different directions, in different scales. In uh, your notes for the show, I only kind of took into consideration the stuff that was in the direct for picking my top five.
Mm.
But I think that Rita's Rewind game is going to be really something special. I think, and
I
I'm not
agree.
even the world's. I didn't grow up with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or whatever. I know their influence. I actually like that movie that came out, the big screen movie not too long ago, which
Oh,
was kind
yeah,
of like
yeah.
a new origin thing. I think it was just made with a great sense of humor, and I liked all the actors. I thought it was quite charming. But I know diehards weren't especially, huge fans of that, and I respect that. But I like the property, and I like what Digital Eclipse has shown us already, and I think they love the property, and I think they're taking a page off of Tribute's um, Turtles experience, which is one
Yeah.
of my favorite games over the last several years. I
Ah,
love that
so
game.
good.
Yeah, this is wonderful. And yeah, I love that idea of 2D superhero experiences like that, and playing with pixel art and shocking us with that imagination. I think it's going to be really lovely. I can't wait for that. But I do
Yeah.
have five that I did pick for 2024, the back half of 2024, mostly out of the Nintendo Direct.
Okay. Well, we'll save
Yeah.
that for the final segment here. But
Okay.
so you're feeling pretty good about the rest of 2024 when I run down that list.
100%. Yeah, no, it's a great year. It might not be at the same caliber of 2023 or the best years like 2017 for the Switch, but there is a lot of really, really cool, exciting stuff that we know about. And I do think, and I might be wrong, but I do think we're going to get another direct with even, cooler new surprises. And also, like, not to be fully taken out of consideration, there's all the NSO embellishment that keeps happening as
Hmm.
well. Like if you're a new Switch player, that's the thing about the Switch. You could buy one this year and you've got a lot of great value to enjoy with this machine. It's still incredibly relevant and incredibly fun. And if you just subscribe to NSO now, plus the expansion pack, right?
Yeah,
You've
and now that I'm thinking about it in that term of like, oh, I've never played a Nintendo console before. Let
yeah.
me get a Switch and a $50 a year subscription.
Yeah.
and
You're
you're
just
set for
eating
life.
well. Yeah, I know. You've got like decades of just super fun stuff and all the Switch launches, the first party stuff and indie games that run beautifully on this machine, Like, yeah, there's some unbelievable stuff. And 2024 was not a squandered year. It's maybe a little bit lighter than some of the best that we've seen, but it's still going to, based on everything that we've seen, just looks insane and incredible. The one game that I believe is coming to the Switch, and I'm not 100% sure, and it wasn't in the direct, and I did not get my hands on with it at SGF, although I've heard that it was there, is the Plucky Squire, and that's on
Mm.
my list. And I think it's going to be a fantastic fit on Nintendo Switch. It
Oh
feels
yeah.
like a Nintendo game. Um, it might run better on other machines, but it feels like a Nintendo game, And
Yes.
from what I've seen, it just looks amazing. It's one of the games that I'm most excited about for 2024. And yeah, so I think that's great. You didn't list that though, so we
No,
don't know when it.
it was on the 2024 like
Okay, maybe. Okay, right. Yeah,
TBD,
yeah.
like
Okay,
not doesn't
good.
have like a set release date, but it's currently like coming in 2024. Who
Yeah, I
knows
can't wait
when?
for that.
Yeah, we've
I
been waiting
can't
for
wait
that one
for
for
that.
a while.
Yeah.
But to your point, like I think this is a better than a typical like quote unquote final year for a console. Like it's certainly better
Yes.
than what we got with the Wii U.
Yeah. Well, maybe not in terms of like overall quality, because we've seen console generations like the PlayStation 3 winding
Mm,
up with Last of Us.
sure.
It still blows my mind that Naughty Dog did 4 PS3 games, like just insanely ambitious PS3 games in one console generation when we still haven't found out what they're working on for PS5. What's their new game for the PlayStation 5? Um, so I think what happens with consoles when you wind it down is everybody knows what to do with the hardware and they deliver their best work. And so we have had lots of great cappers, excellent games that sort of shut the door a little bit for us on the transition to the next one. But I don't think we have many console generations where we have the end of this cycle being so proliferate with bangers, so many good ones. The only interesting thing in this equation is that Nintendo has been able to deliver years of bangers on a consistent basis, where it's just
Hmm.
been flooded, especially with their first party, with so much creativity and imagination that it's like, hard to believe they can sustain it, but they again have, just the fact that we have an RPG action adventure in the Zelda world with a totally new direction for mechanics, and we have a new Mario RPG following up on these remakes that they've done with Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario. That's really amazing. I mean, those are huge games that
Yeah.
they're kind of winding a year down with, incredible.
It is incredible. It blew away my expectations of what I thought the second half of this year was going to be for Nintendo. Because it was like, okay, yeah, looking at the first half, we had Princess Peach Showtime, sure, but then we had a bunch of like remasters and remakes that Nintendo was
Yeah,
putting out. And it's like, all right, Mario vs. Donkey Kong remake, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD remaster. We didn't know a whole lot more beyond that. And it's just like,
right.
okay, Nintendo World Championships NES edition looks really cool, but it's still just like kind of remixing old content.
Yeah,
What, like, is that just what we're going to get the rest of this year? And it's like, oh no, we're getting a new Zelda game, we're getting a new Mario and Luigi game. Like, man, like they just blew my expectations out of the water for what I thought. Because I was like, okay, we're obviously in like the last couple of breaths of air that the Switch is going to get as Nintendo's flagship console. And then, here we go. Here comes the Nintendo Direct, and never mind.
yeah. Yeah, that's why I think that there's more to the story than we're kind of talking about. I don't think this is a traditional console transition. I think that they're going to Game Boy eyes the Nintendo Switch. I think it's going to feel like we're going to a premium new machine with the Switch 2
Hmm.
with some really serious horsepower and backwards compatibility. But I think we're also going to get a lot of those games also running on the Nintendo Switch. And people that own the Switch are going to feel a lot less apprehensive about taking that thing everywhere. And so I think we're going to get the uh, games that launch for both machines for years to come.
Well, it's like,
I don't think it's just going to fade away.
yeah, it's like Furukawa said in like the Nintendo earnings call, where he was like, Switch next model is the appropriate way to think of our next system.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that tells you that you're probably on the right track there with your line of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's why they should do the dual screen thing and let us take the Joy-Con off and slap it into a new holder and boom, I mean, that would be amazing.
it would be something really cool about that. But I have one more big question for you with regards to Nintendo's second half of 2024. But
Yeah.
first, we're going to take a break. And when we get back, we will do just that and then get Victor's eShop Gem of the Week. We will be right back. We are back, and it's time for Definitive Ranking, a recurring segment where we take a Nintendo topic and give our own personal top 5 lists. Since I just ran down the list of what is coming out for the rest of 2024 for Switch, Victor, I want to get your top 5 games you are most excited about for the rest of the year. So start with 5, count it down to 1, give me a sentence or two about each.
Okay. Number 5 for me is Dragon Quest III, the HD 2D remake that's coming. I didn't play the original stuff. I've played a lot of RPGs, but that's not my top line first thing that I always go to.
Mm.
But I love them and I do appreciate them like crazy. And I did love Dragon Quest 11, and I know the history and the legacy of Dragon Quest. So it's going to be amazing to re-experience this game, or to experience it in my case for the first time in this beautiful format. And I love these Square Enix HD 2D games, or is it HD 2D or
HD
2D
2D. I always
HD
get it
2D?
confused, but I think that
Yeah.
because I wrote a preview about Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake, I got it in my head that that is the way it's supposed to be, and yeah, it's very confusing.
I love those games though. I loved Live Alive. I
Beautiful art
loved,
style.
yeah, Triangle Strategy, and of course the Octopath Traveler games. They've just all blown me away. And now with this story and these characters, I think I'm going to love that game. Number 4 for me is The Plucky Squire,
Mm.
which I don't know the name of the developer, but Devolver's publishing it. And I'm a huge fan of a Link Between Worlds, the Legend of Zelda game, where you would go from a 2D sort of painting on the wall, and then you'd pop out and it'd be kind of traditional overhead. I just love that perspective change, and this idea of being this character that pops out of an art book or a picture book and then is running around in two-dimensional form and in 3D character form in this game world with a mix of kind of photoreal elements and animated elements. It looks just exquisite, and it looks so Nintendo friendly for me. Mario and Luigi Brothership. I don't know too much about this other than the mechanics that got shown off and the trailer stuff that we've seen so far. But I am so ready to have the two brothers kind of work together to solve these puzzles and to play with these new mechanics. They've said in subsequent pieces that I've been reading and blurbs that I've been reading that some of the Alpha Dream, was that the
Yeah,
company
yeah,
that
yeah.
was making it? Some of the Alpha Dream people are working on this, so some veterans from the franchise are a part of this. I'm excited by that, but it looks great, and it's I just love that it's a new game and not a remake or a remaster, which I thought that was the case when they first started rolling into it on the direct. It's totally new, which I think is amazing. Number 2 is Marvel vs. Capcom fighting game collection. This mix of arcade experiences, being able to throw the Punisher into this and playing one
Oh
of the
yeah.
most expensive Genesis games that you can buy. If you want to get that cartridge, you're spending hundreds of dollars.
Mm.
And they're great games, man. They're great, freaking awesome 2D experiences with some of the greatest characters in pop culture, but great video game characters with all of these different mechanics and animations and the skill sets that each of these
And,
characters have. So excited about this.
and
You know,
Marvel's in such a different place now than it was even when Marvel vs. Capcom 2 came out. Like, I mean, think about
right,
like where Marvel was then when they were just like basically doing a fire sale of their licenses, and now it's
right.
like, they're one of the biggest things on the planet.
They're the crown jewel. Yeah. And which is interesting because maybe, and I don't know, I haven't dug into this, but maybe there's some new little pieces in there that Marvel and
Mm.
Capcom have worked out, which would be really rad. I don't know if there is, or maybe this leads to something new, which is also equally exciting. The idea
That's
that
always
this
the
is the
hope.
beginning. Yeah, at the beginning of something. But to have these collected works, and some of them have been almost impossible to purchase and buy and unless you're made of money and you collect all of this stuff, and then even then you're preserving it and not even touching it, you're putting it somewhere. It's going to be rad to have that
Well,
on my Switch.
I'm very excited to have that on my Switch. We were talking before we started about my arcade one-up cabinets.
Yeah,
One of mine is the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 cabinet, which I
great.
adore. I can't wait to have it on the go now because, like, as cool as these cabinets are, they're not exactly portable.
No, no, I'm so envious. I wish I had the basement space to have. I have the little ones. These are from
Mhm.
Replicate, and I love these things. They're actually playable, but I would love a little mini arcade down in my space. But Vancouver real estate super freaking expensive out
Yeah.
here. I just don't have the basement space for that. Maybe one day. But number one on my list is Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. And it's all about this finally getting our hands on the character of Zelda and playing a mainline Zelda experience that ties to story elements and bits and mythology that we are familiar with, although they always adapt it for each new game. It's almost a reinvention every single time, but I am so psyched to learn her skill set and learn those mechanics. And the art style is so representative of lots of Zelda games that I've loved before. Genuinely, I love the representation as well. I think with the Princess Peach game, it was really cool to share that with my kid. I think it's going to be awesome to let her play as Zelda and see what she's got to say about this. I think it's really important. I have this story that I default to when I was editing the 2016 Ghostbusters movie review that I did, and it was just an okay movie. But I was putting the clips together. My little 4-year-old at the time came in and looked up way up because she was shorter than my desk at that time, and she looked up at my monitor and said, "There are girl Ghostbusters," and it hit me through the heart that my 4-year-old kid recognized the disparity in female heroes and male heroes. And
Mhm.
we'd never talked to her about any of that, but she saw it. She saw that there was this you know absence of female representation in these beautiful characters. And she knew I loved video games and had played through Zelda games and had seen Zelda. One of her first things that she picked up on was the White Witch in Final Fantasy for the NES Classic Edition, the little mini NES Classic thing.
Mhm.
She saw me playing a little Final Fantasy. She saw a little White Witch. I like the White Witch. It's just a bunch of pixels. And she saw herself in this little bunch of pixels. So it's going to be cool to see what she's got to say now. Obviously no longer 4, but it's going to be cool for her to see and play as Zelda and get her thoughts on that. Now, I hope she loves it, and I hope I love it. But it's the number one game I'm most excited for on the Switch for the rest of 2024.
For sure. I mean, it was, I think, but I said this last episode, but when you talk about what your biggest surprise or biggest, not biggest surprise, but biggest, most exciting game that came out of that direct, I feel like it was either Metroid Prime or
Mm,
Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I mean, maybe some people said Mario and Luigi Brothership, but I think that a lot of people probably are leaning towards Zelda Echoes of Wisdom and
yeah,
just some really cool mechanics. And I can't wait to play that. I love top-down Zeldas. I mean,
me
my
too.
two favorite Zeldas are 3D Zeldas, but then, like, A Link Between Worlds, I adore that game. A Link to the
That's
Past, one of the
amazing.
all-time greatest
Yes.
games. So yeah.
A Link Between Worlds on the Switch 2 with the Switch as the bottom screen.
we're gonna we're gonna
That's
manifest this idea. We're gonna
it's
speak
gonna
this into
happen.
existence.
Oh my god.
But
But
all
yeah,
right,
I
well,
can't wait for Metroid 4. Holy crap. That looks
yeah,
gorgeous.
it
I
looks
love that
fantastic as
franchise so
well.
much. Yeah.
I wish it was earlier, not
Yeah.
2025. But what can you
Yeah.
do? We've been waiting for it since 2017.
We just saw it, man. We finally saw it. Not just the title screen. We saw
Yeah.
something. It's going to be great.
All right, so I have two games that overlap with yours on my top five, and then three games that are completely distinct. So we'll start with number
Cool.
five, Marvel vs. Capcom Collection. All the reasons you
Great.
said, love
Yep.
those games. I'm excited for actually the older ones like X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel versus Street
Yes.
Fighter. Like you said, the
Yes.
Punisher game. Very excited for that. But then, of course, having the bona fide classics like Marvel vs. Capcom and Marvel vs. Capcom 2, very very excited for all of that, plus a lot
Yep.
of online play on that. I'm not that I'm
Yep.
gonna spend too much time doing that because I know that if I go online with those games I'll get my butt handed to me.
It would have been okay for them to put 3 on there. I know they're
Yeah,
3D, but
yeah, I mean,
3 was so good too. 3 was an excellent game. They couldn't quite meet that again, that match that again. But 3 was excellent,
Yeah,
man.
3 was really good.
So exciting.
When you said that, I immediately went to Infinite, which I was like, "No, no, no, keep that away
Yeah.
if you can." But
Yeah.
no, 3 was very good, especially
Yeah.
Ultimate 3. I
Yeah.
wish they did, but, maybe they'll do that
Yeah.
as, like, a standalone release. It's already on, I believe, both PS5 and Xbox Series X through backward compatibility,
Yes. Yeah.
but maybe I'm
And it's
wrong.
Steam Deck compatible too.
Oh, even better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number 4 for me, SteamWorld Heist 2. This is a game that I got my hands on at Summer Game Fest, and I was not a SteamWorld fan really, but I went
Mm.
into this appointment and I was like, "Okay, it's a big game that, like, people are excited for." And I played it for about an hour and I was like, "Man, this is a lot of fun." Like, I am
They're
really like
great game makers over there. Yeah.
I went home and I downloaded SteamWorld Heist 1 on my Switch and played for about 2 hours just to, like, get a taste of it again, and now, like, it's coming out not too I think it's August 8th is the release date, so don't have long to wait. So I did play a few hours of it on my Switch, and then I was like, "All right, I'm gonna tap the brakes and just let that anticipation ride until SteamWorld Heist 2 comes out." So looking
That's
forward to
great to
that.
hear.
Uh,
I love those SteamWorld games, but I feel like I Dig 1 and 2 blew me away, and then I got into because they've got other ones, but I feel like they've made so many of them in such a short amount of time that they haven't done the Nintendo trick of letting anticipation build, and letting us miss these things a
it's
little
almost
bit.
like the Yakuza series where it was like, "All right, you liked
Yeah,
Yakuza
exactly.
0. Here's 1 through 5 in the span of 2 years,
Yeah, totally.
plus
And
new
they're long
entries."
games. They take a
Yeah,
long time with long cutscenes, and it's like, oh my god, I'm living in this world now.
exactly. But hey, there's worse places to live than a
Totally.
fictionalized Tokyo.
Yes.
Number 3, Fantasian Neo Dimension. I don't know if you played
Yeah,
this on Apple Arcade.
I have. Yes.
I played maybe about 5, 6 hours of it. I enjoyed
Hmm.
what I played of it, and I was like, "Oh, I'd love this on a console. That's what I really want." And lo and
Yeah.
behold, that's what we're getting.
Yeah.
It's from Hironobu Sakaguchi and Nobuo Uematsu, the creator of Final Fantasy and the longtime composer of Final Fantasy. So,
Published by
like,
Square Enix.
published by Square Enix.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a big deal.
it was very well received on Apple Arcade, and I can't
Yeah.
imagine it's going. And for people who hear that and think like, "Oh no, it's a mobile game," but Apple Arcade's core concept is there are no microtransactions. You just
Yeah.
what you get is what you get, and if there's any updates, they're free of charge. So that's what I'm most excited for. Is it's a new RPG by the guy who made Final Fantasy 1 through 10,
Yeah.
and then
And
left.
they made dioramas, which was really cool, and they
Yeah,
digitized these physical backgrounds into the gameplay, and so there's a real tactility to the world that you're running around in. It's beautiful, and there's some great because Apple paid for this, so there's some great behind the scenes stuff if you're interested in it to watch on YouTube, sort of how they put all of this stuff together. It's a fascinating story. I'm just really glad that more people are going to be able to jump into it and play it.
for sure, and it
Yeah,
deserves the spotlight. And again, I've shouted this out a few times, but Lost Odyssey by the same studio,
yeah,
just a top tier RPG from this century. Like
yeah.
I always pitch it as the single player Final Fantasy 11 that we never got
Super dope.
because it's so good. I wish it was
Yeah,
on more platforms than just Xbox 360 though.
yeah.
Like that would be perfect on Switch or Steam Deck or something. Like I would play that on a flight easily.
Yeah. Is that backwards compatible, do you know,
It
on
is, yeah.
Xbox?
You
Yeah,
can
okay,
fire it
cool.
up on your Xbox Series X right now if you want. And I think they even put it on sale pretty frequently. I think when it first released, they put it out on the like digital storefronts. I think originally it was physical only,
Right.
and then they recently put it on digital storefronts, like when they were doing that push of like Xbox 360 games working on Xbox One. And I think
Yeah.
when they put it out, it was like on sale for $2 just to like celebrate this game coming out
Wow.
on digital for the first time ever. And I was like, oh, that's the easiest $2 I've ever dropped in my life. So yeah, I'm excited for another game from that studio. Number
Legend.
2, another Apple Arcade game, TMNT Splintered Fate.
That's a very cool game, and because both of those are on Apple Arcade, and I've checked them both out, I didn't put them on my list, but those are two very cool experiences.
I have not actually checked this out. I downloaded it because again, I'm an Apple Arcade subscriber. But
Yep.
then like I looked at it and I'm like, I don't want to go through like I don't want to pair my controller. Like if I'm playing a game on mobile, I just want to
Yeah.
play it on my phone. I want to hold my phone upright or
Just
sideways or whatever.
not to turn this into a Razer Kishi ad. Oh, I don't want to show my family, but uh, hold on. Let me open it up. I have the I have the Razer Kishi Ultra on my iPhone here, and oh wait a second, open, there it is. Um, and it's amazing. Like it is just like it's very expensive, but it turns it into like you forget that you're playing on a phone when
Hmm.
you get the right controller on this thing. And they sent me one to review, and I was on flights, and I'm like, I thought I was on a Steam Deck,
That's
and now
incredible.
Apple's releasing AAA games like Resident Evil. They're
Assassin's
partnering with
Creed.
Capcom, Assassin's Creed, and stuff. Yeah, people. I feel like Apple is stealthily moving into this really interesting space. They could do more with Apple Arcade, but when you're playing Apple Arcade games with a controller like that, you're not thinking about what you're missing. You're just playing the games. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I'm gonna need to get myself one of those. Like, but I already have two bulky things that I carry in my bag, in addition to
Yeah,
like my iPad and all that other stuff. It's like, all right, the Steam Deck is very bulky. I mean, it's
it
portable,
is.
it's comfortable
Yeah,
in your hands, but stuffing it in a bag, like with that
yeah,
case, is just like at least the
yeah.
Switch is pretty slimline when you slide it into like your backpack or something. But like the Steam Deck
Totally.
takes up the vast majority. So adding another
Yeah, and
thing.
this is Steam Deck sized, honestly, and they didn't really
Mhm.
ship it with the case. That was one of my complaints with it, because you got to protect everything, when you.
Yeah.
Anyways, uh, yeah,
But yeah, so Splintered Fate, I'm excited to finally have that on a console. And then number one, I bet anybody listening to this show can guess what it is. It is Zelda Echoes of Wisdom for all the reasons we've already
yeah,
talked about.
yeah.
So Victor, that brings us to the final segment of this show. It's the eShop Gem of the Week. It's a chance for you to shout out a game that you think deserves a little bit more shine on the Switch eShop. So what is your Switch eShop Gem of the Week?
Oh man, this is a great question. And I thought about Mark of the Ninja. I thought about Owlboy. I thought about the SteamWorld Dig games. There's a lot of gold in there. For a long time, the Switch was, I think, the default for a lot of us as the place to get indie stuff. And to get
Mhm.
um, like Toki Tori. I mean, there's just so many golden little pieces of great video game media there. But the game that I kept coming back to is the Tourist, which is from Shinin, who made that fast racing game, which was a launch title, a sort of Wipeout like that actually is really solid. It's also a great little eShop discovery. But the Tourist is very special. It's a voxel graphics focused little action adventure, Zelda esque, about a guy that goes to a series of islands and goes on a bunch of missions for like regular folk. Has to take pictures of things, has to find little special items. It becomes a lot more supernatural esque, and grander in its scope. But one of my favorite things in the game is that you actually go, and I always love this in video games, you actually go into a little arcade, and there's a little voxel arcade with all these little voxel games. And you can play the games. You can walk up to these little arcade cabinets and play all of these different titles. And they have like a version of their fast racing game as this little voxel pixelized little thing that you can play. And you're challenging your best scores and stuff. But there's lots of little mini game interactions and lots of interesting, humorous surprises with all the characters you meet. And it just keeps unfolding. It's so clever. Very addictive. I couldn't put it down when I played it. I haven't stopped thinking about it since I played it. And
Wow.
if you haven't checked it out, I totally think you should.
This was a pandemic game for me, actually. Like when we were all
Yeah,
locked down, I think it was on Xbox Game Pass, and that's how I
that's
experienced it.
right. Yes.
And I just fired it up. I was just out of the blue. I was like, oh, this game looks like it could be cool. It was like a new release on Game Pass, and I played it all the way to completion. I think the reason that I didn't 100% it, because there's a lot of stuff you can do in this game, was
Yeah.
because of those arcade games, because some of them were so challenging. It was like, you got to
Yeah.
hit the
They
high
are.
score on all these games. I'm like, nope, not doing that. But I had a really great time with it.
Yeah, isn't it special? I mean,
It
I,
is.
I
It
I
is a
don't
really
see
cool
tons
little
of
game.
people. I don't see tons of people talking about it. I saw John Linneman from Digital Foundry raving about it, and I don't know if I'd already downloaded it at that time or not. But I remember getting as obsessively hooked on it as he was, and I don't think people talk about it enough. It's amazing.
No, you even said it when, like, right before we started this, and I was like, oh, like, why does that sound familiar? And I was like, oh, because I played this game to completion.
Yeah,
But it came to Switch in 2019, and it's only $20, but I'm sure it goes on sale pretty frequently. At this point, it's an indie
yeah.
title that's
It's
5
worth
years
20 bucks.
old.
It's
Yeah, it's
worth
worth
that
20.
$20,
It
and it's
sure
not gonna
is.
age like it's not gonna look old, crappier as time goes on. It's got a very distinct style, and it's freaking cool. I hope there's a sequel, honestly.
I would love that. I mean, there's some really cool stuff, some ideas, some really great execution of those ideas. But I would like to see what they could do if they took this formula further and like took all these
Totally.
ideas that, some of them weren't fully fleshed out. I feel like they
Yep.
they kind of had to compromise on some of the ideas that they had, but it's still, like you said, a very, very fun game, very good
Yeah.
experience to play through, and it would be amazing on the go. So I didn't even think about that.
It reminds me a little bit of 3D Dot Pixel Heroes, I think, that old
Hmm.
classic, I think it was PS3 360 game that
Didn't
was
From
total
Software
Zelda.
make it?
Yeah, I think so. A
Which is
little Zelda
wild.
off. Yeah, but
Yeah,
but that same kind of pixelated, blocky 3D art style. I think they also used voxels, but
they
anyway,
did.
really, really cool game.
I'm shocked that that game has not gotten ported, by the way. 3D Dot Hero
Yeah.
or 3D Dot Heroes. Yeah, From Software was the publisher. I'm sorry. So Silicon
Mm,
Studio was the developer. The team behind Bravely Default
wild.
was the developer behind that. So I'm
There's two
surprised that has not
gems.
come. Yeah, two gems. And unfortunately, one is stuck on the PS3 and not on any
Yeah.
other system, which is just
Oh,
wild to me because
but the
it's
rumors of a PS3 emulation thing happening on PS5 are very tantalizing. I hope
that would
that
be
happens.
rad. That would be
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Victor, that concludes this episode. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of All Things Nintendo.
Oh man, my absolute pleasure. You're a wonderful person to talk with. I'm very grateful for this invitation, and thank you for indulging me and talking about all my history and all that stuff. And this was great. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. And thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. Hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea, or leave a comment on the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page. Also, be sure to find All Things Nintendo on YouTube and subscribe to that channel. You can search for All Things Nintendo or visit at Brian P. Shea on YouTube. Victor, where can people find you online?
Well, the mothership for the repository of our history, I think you can find it youtube.com/EPNTV. And I'm on Twitter, Victor_Lucas, Threads, and Instagram as Batwing. We've got a TikTok channel where I do cut like shorter videos and stuff there. It's tiktok.com/@theelectricplayground. And yeah, content just sort of filters across a whole bunch of these different things. And Twitch, I stream often at twitch.tv/EPN. And my podcast is called Vic's Basement. So you got to do all the things.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening and watching and supporting our stuff. Many of you for many, many years. I'm very grateful.
That is our show for this week. Thank you all again so much for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.